Hannah Montana was widely considered to be Disney's biggest show of the 2000s. Its merch even made it to New Zealand, clearly, but as much as I'm sure that many of us dreamed about living a life like Miley Cyrus, where she got to be, supposedly, a normal girl during the day, and a pop star at night, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. In our last episode, we kind of spoke about the audition process, we spoke about what it might have been like to be on set of Hannah Montana, and we also learned some secrets about the cast dynamics and the workload. And the workload, I can't wear this. Sit it on my shoulder like a parrot. The workload is what we're going to be picking up in this video. If you remember, we ended our last video with me saying that Miley Cyrus was under a lot of stress, and that was maybe exposing itself in ways that even she didn't realize at the time, because Miley felt like she just had to be strong and power through things, and she couldn't really stop to feel everything that she was feeling. But there are a couple of stories that we have that sort of pinpoint some of the stress that Miley might have been under. Oh, sorry team, I was so gung-ho about getting into the content that I forgot my quick usual disclaimer, and how could I forget that? I'm gonna run you guys through that now, okay? You can't get out of it that easy. So basically what I say is that I'm just a girl with Google, so please don't trust everything I say verbatim. I've done a lot of research, but I'm not infallible. As difficult as it may be to admit that. No, please chat in the comments, share what you know, do some research if anything interests you and you want to know more and nail down the facts yourself. Also, I have merch. You can see it up on the screen right now. Very comfy. I'd highly recommend. And if you want to see more of this type of nostalgic content from me, I should be uploading it on my second channel, which is made for all of this type of content. Talia is not old. That channel is still very much in the process of getting off the ground, so the more support I have, the more I can post on there. And the last thing I need to say is that my accent is a Kiwi accent. I'm from New Zealand. A lot of people ask, so I like to just knock that out right at the start of the video. Alright, thanks for listening. I'm going to drop you back into the video now. And the first one I want to touch on is one that Michael Poyers shared. If you don't remember, Michael Poyers was a co-creator, co-script writer, co-showrunner of Hannah Montana. And he recalled that he told Miley, always, that's a shame. The Hannah Montana purse just doesn't work for me anymore, team. I got it for Christmas when I was 16, so it never actually worked for me. But regardless, Michael Poyers he recalled that he told Miley that he had her back. He said, if you need 5 minutes to walk away and collect yourself because you're going through a hard time, then I'm gonna make that happen for you. And Michael said that during the course of filming the entire show, Miley took him up on that offer once, one singular time. And that one time that she did say, I need a breather, so many of the other adults on set complained that they were on kid time, they didn't have long, they needed her to keep working. But Michael was like, I've given her my word, and so he let her go. And she really wasn't gone for long. She only took the 5 minutes. He said that right on cue, Miley came back, she smashed her next take. It was like nothing was even amiss at all. She'd stuffed it all down. And that stood out to me as being something that she shouldn't have needed to be so good at. Do you know what I mean? But there's also another story from set that shows how much Miley did not want to let anybody down. And it surrounds the fact that Miley actually got her period for the first time ever on the set of Hannah Montana. She said that she was wearing white capris as her outfit that day, and this cute new actor had asked to have lunch with her, and it just felt like the worst timing ever. Because I was so totally unprepared for it to happen. So Miley remembered, it was so embarrassing, but I couldn't leave. She said, and I was crying, begging my mom, you're gonna have to put the tampon in, I have to be on set. And so Miley recalled that she spent her break that day sobbing to her mum, Tish, while they were frantically going back and forth. They were trying to locate another pair of pants that Miley could wear so that she could get back out there and do her job. Just no time to process anything that was happening in her actual life. It was all about the show. And Miley couldn't even leave that stress on set. It followed her home as well. Because you name it, magazines, newspapers, tabloids, I guess, they had so much to say about what Miley was doing and what she was saying. And of course what she was looking like, which did give her a little bit of a unpreferable body image. And on top of all of that, during the course of Hannah Montana being produced, social media evolved to be more popular and more cutthroat than it had ever been. It went from being mostly surrounding MySpace, places that you could talk to your actual real life friends, to everything everywhere all at once with Instagram, Facebook, even YouTube. So there were so many people that were actively watching Miley's every move every day, and not all of those people liked Miley. And yet they all had a voice that she could hear thanks to the internet. So every single person's feedback about her was reachable to Miley, and it wasn't all positive by any means. It wasn't even all constructive. It turned out that Miley was living through exactly what her dad had feared was in store for her when she first auditioned for Hannah Montana. It was a dream and a nightmare all at once. Thankfully, Miley's mum Tish did work hard to keep her grounded, because Tish, she was kind of just like your typical good mum. From the sounds of things, this is from what Tish has said and Miley has said, but Tish really just wanted Miley to be happy, so she was in her corner no matter what she did. And it was that way for her whole life. It was, you know, whether Miley was a competitive cheerleader or whether she was on Hannah Montana, whether she was living in Nashville or LA, whether she was bloated and covered in acne, or whether she was red carpet ready, Tish showed Miley the same kind of love. Tish loved her daughter because she existed as her daughter, not because of the external factors that other people might have defined her by, and I think that was really healthy for Miley, especially because Tish did try to instill that positive self-talk into her daughter as well, but that can only balance so much. I mean, that's a tiny little weight on the scale of things, isn't it? And anonymous people online or journalists, they could be very, very cruel. To the media, Billy Ray Cyrus, Miley Cyrus's father, is quoted as saying, "She's bulletproof. Miley can handle anything. She knows that the only thing that matters is how she feels, and she's playing life by heart," which is what I've always done. He said, "I've always tried to remain real and remain true to who I am, and I think that's what Miley's doing too." And I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was trying to keep things level and grounded, but Miley has admitted that as much as we have spoken about how she was kind of largely immune to feeling things when she was in the thick of them because she was just in survival mode, all of these sort of trying aspects of being a public figure did affect her. The feedback did get to her. And how could it not? For one, she was a teenager. She was developing her own self-image in amongst all of this noise, but also it was everywhere. Everywhere you looked. Like, Miley Cyrus was a really big name, not just with children. At this point, by like saying 2008, 2009, everyone knew who Miley Cyrus was. And that's kind of because every single thing that Miley did was a headline. You could not escape Miley Cyrus. It seemed like everyone, whether they were 5 years old or 50 years old, cared about what Miley was doing. It was bizarre. Starting in 2008, when Miley was 15, Miley had these photos circulating that showed her, I guess she was like hanging out with her friends or something and they just snapped a photo. But she had, and this is a quote from like a media source, her midriff exposed. And she also revealed her bra in another photo. And that was big news for some reason. But what sort of exacerbated that situation was that around the same time, Miley did this photo shoot in which she posed topless. She had like a sheet covering her front half and her back was bare, and she was looking towards the camera in the photo that ended up going around. And she got eaten alive for it. Miley had to issue a public apology, and it read, "I took part in a photo shoot that was supposed to be artistic, and now, seeing the photographs and reading the story, I feel so embarrassed." She said, "I never intended for any of this to happen, and I apologize to my fans who I care so deeply about." But then I'm going to break the timeline a little bit, because 10 years later, Miley looked back at this situation in hindsight and she retracted that apology because it wasn't something that she should have had to be sorry for in the first place. But at the time, Miley was so aware of all of these things that she was supposed to be that she saw not being perceived by the public as like a perfect person as a shortcoming of hers. It was like she'd done something wrong, and that hurt. It hurt Miley to have everything that she did, everything that she tried, sort of thrown back in her face. She concluded at the time that these people that harped on every little thing she did were full of anger, hatred, and bitterness, but it still stung what they were doing to her. And when I say that everything she did was a headline, I mean everything. Like, she couldn't escape the news. There was a video I came across, it was called "Miley Cyrus Drops a Paparazzo's iPhone," that had nearly 6 million views.
Thank you.
Oh my god, I dropped his iPhone.
And I came across this article from 2009. It was entitled "Miley Cyrus Gets Her Nose Pierced," that documented the conversations that she had, a 16-year-old Miley Cyrus had with her parents that allowed her to get this nose ring. It commented on what her dating life looked like. And then there was this other article that I came across that said that Miley, she even had to make a statement that, contrary to what some people were thinking, there was nothing weird about her relationship with her dad. Literally everything in Miley's life was a talking point. Even the stuff that should have been personal, because her whole family was kind of in the news, you know, especially with Billy Ray being such a big name. So she said later that, you know, she was really starting to feel the consequences of this choice that she made when she was 11 years old to throw that away, to throw away her anonymity. And as much as she's grateful of what has come of that, she couldn't have made a fully informed choice at the ripe old age of 11. And Miley has said that she kind of learnt they were coping mechanisms. Whether they were healthy or not, I'm not sure. But one of them was, you know, she found reprieve in hiding within a character. That's something that she learnt to do on her show, obviously, because Miley Stewart was secretly Hannah Montana. That was like a whole nother persona, a whole nother character that she stepped into. And Miley kind of saw that as being like an armor. So she created this armor of being a confident, beautiful pop star. But behind that, Miley felt small, and it was all the little things that added up as well. You know, for one, she went through all of the normal human being things. She had acne when she was a teenager, she would bloat sometimes. And then in Miley's work life, it was great for her career that she shared a name with her character on Hannah Montana, because it made Miley a household name. Like, her name was so unusual that it was good that had become part of the public consciousness. But it was also hard for Miley in the sense that she had to constantly read these scripts about Miley Stewart, but Miley not being good enough for the boys, not being valuable enough to be celebrated. And then when she put on the blonde wig and she put on her bedazzled jeans, she said she became Hannah, and then people liked her, and then people celebrated her. So as much as Hannah's writers did have a goal in mind to produce a show that made little girls feel valuable, and some would say that they succeeded in that, they weren't child psychologists, were they? So they didn't really have the foresight to see the way that their underlying messages, the underlying message of the show, might be detrimental to at least one young girl, which was, of course, Miley Cyrus. And Miley later said that as much as she could recognize that the concept was great and it was entertaining, it just perhaps wasn't the best thing for an impressionable mind to be absorbed in and day out, because she did get sort of the wrong message from it, from playing that character. And, you know, it sucked because Miley felt like her life story was being written for her. And then again, that didn't end at work. It expanded into magazines and social media, and so in the end it felt like Miley's life wasn't really in her hands, because there was always something being written about her that was spinning another story. Speaking to Marie Claire later, Miley is quoted as saying, "From the time I was 11, it was, you're a pop star. That means you have to be blonde, you have to have long hair, and you have to put on some glittery tight thing. Meanwhile, I'm this fragile little girl playing a 16-year-old in a wig and a ton of makeup. It was like toddlers and tiaras. I had fucking flippers," which are like those retainers with fake teeth that like fill out someone's smile. So Miley said, "I was told for so long what a girl is supposed to be. From being on that show, I was made to look like someone that I wasn't, which probably caused some body dysmorphia because I had been made pretty every day for so long." And without that, she said that her greatest fear when she sort of got into this whole mess had come true. Without that, she didn't know who she was. Miley was just paying so much attention to what people thought of her, and it kind of felt like her survival banked on it. So it was to the point where she couldn't tell who she really was or what she stood for or who she wanted to be, because there was no room for that. And Miley, you know, she was an emotional teenager, as it was. I mean, a lot of teenagers are emotional, but anxiety runs in Miley's family as well. And that started to rear its ugly head a lot when she was probably in her mid-teens. Miley later said that I would have anxiety attacks. I'd get hot flashes. I'd feel like I was about to pass out or throw up. It would happen a lot before shows and I'd have to cancel. Then, she said, the anxiety started coming from anxiety. I would be with my friends thinking I should be having so much fun, but you get in this hole that it seems like you're never going to be able to get out of. And Miley's mental state was only made worse by the sheer overwhelm that she felt as Hannah Montana transitioned more and more into being a brand rather than a character. Because she'd be told by Disney executives that she had to go on tours and release albums and speak to the press and do endorsements and attend charity events, and there was all this merchandise popping up as well that had like her photoshopped, airbrushed face on it, and it was just a lot. Miley had very little say in what she did or what she wore or what her image was used for. And I actually recently saw an interview of Taylor Momsen in which she was speaking about, you know, how she went for the Hannah Montana role and she didn't end up getting it, and she said, listen, if I was Hannah Montana, I don't think the show would have been as successful as it was, because I would have just started saying no. I mean, that's paraphrased, but Miley was working a lot. She was under so much pressure. And nothing was necessarily about Miley. It was all about Hannah Montana. It was what was best for the character, what was best for the show, what was best for Disney, the corporation Disney. So Disney had taken this girl, Miley Cyrus, who the channel's entertainment president, Gary Marsh, had once said had a love for every minute of her life, and they'd turned her on her head. You could possibly say that they exploited that joy and that energy and that passion that she had, because they looked at that and they saw dollar signs. And so as Hannah Montana became more popular, life for Miley became less about acting and more about being a cash cow. And what made that worse was that Miley's identity, like we've said, was so wrapped up in her show that she felt like she was working so hard only to not be presented with many of her own personal opportunities, because you've got to remember Miley Cyrus was putting in all this work and Hannah Montana was getting the credit for it. So she spoke later about how she'd see good things happening to the likes of the Jonas Brothers, people like that, and she'd think, what am I not doing to earn that for myself? Not that she was jealous of them or that she didn't want to see them succeed, it was just she was like, I want that too. But I think the thing is that, I mean, Miley Cyrus at the time, she made more money as Hannah Montana. More people liked her when she was Hannah Montana. That's why she was always marketed in the public eye alongside Hannah Montana. Because how could Miley Cyrus possibly amount to the same level of fame and stardom and appreciation as Hannah Montana? She couldn't. Miley was nothing if not for Hannah Montana. Miley was nothing if she wasn't Hannah Montana. That's the message that she was getting. And the cherry on top is that Miley was going through all of that while, as far as she knows, being underpaid. I mean, of course, there's the rumors going around that, you know, she made $1 million a week on tour and stuff like that, but specifically on the show, I don't know, I'll read you what I've seen. So in Miley's book, Miles to Go, she wrote that she knew that she was making a decent chunk of change off of the work that she was doing, but she didn't see it. She said that it all kind of disappeared into some mysterious account somewhere, and she kind of didn't know what happened to it, but that didn't really concern her because she wasn't working for that reason necessarily. She was working because she was passionate. She wanted to set herself up for her future. So she wasn't like money hungry. She was like, I don't need the money right now. And Miley, as suspicious as this sounds, Miley to this day has said that she does come from a family with decent morals, and so they didn't steal from her, unlike so many other child stars could say, unfortunately. Miley's money was safe. Her parents did not need it to live off of. It just was going somewhere for her later, genuinely. Tish has spoken about it recently.
I don't know why Miley said this, but she called me like 3 days ago and she goes, Mommy, thanks for you never being jealous of me or stealing all my money. And I was like, oh, you're welcome.
No, you're not. She's not one of those moms.
And then Billy Ray is also quoted as saying, for the record, to set it straight, I want to tell you I've never made a dime off of Miley. You got a lot of people have made percentages off of her. I'm proud to say, to this day, I've never made one commissioned dollar or dime off of my daughter. And that is, hand on heart, that's a great thing. My hand was not on my heart when I said that, but it's the thought that counts, right? It's great that Billy Ray was the breadwinner for the Cyrus family and not the child, Miley Cyrus. And Miley has expressed her gratitude for that. Not that you should have to, do you know what I mean? Like, it should just be a given, but it's not, and so she's thankful. But what Miley has also said is that her dad, despite his own personal experience in the entertainment industry, he wasn't a great businessman. And as a kid, of course, Miley didn't know much about the financial side of things. She literally was like, I know I'm making good money, but I don't know how much I'm making. And Tish wasn't in the entertainment industry herself. And so basically all of them put together could not negotiate a good rate for Miley on the show of Hannah Montana. And you know, when she first got the job, Miley was just pumped to be on Disney and she was like, I don't really care. But there were a few things that crept up on Miley and her parents because they were a bit blasé about the whole thing. They just trusted the process and they didn't really steer the ship. Like, for example, Miley said, my name was Miley on the show, but I didn't earn my name. She said, we didn't think about that. Like, yeah, you can use my name on your show, sure. But then my mum started understanding how many people take advantage of a child, so she hired smart people to protect me in that way. I'm happy that when I was younger, people protected me, she said. But still, for a while, Miley said that she was probably the least paid person on Hannah Montana, and she was the star of the show. And she was working very, very hard. So it made me think, if Miley, with her like famous dad, her supportive parents, could be taken advantage of in some kind of way, then I can't imagine what less fortunate child stars must endure in the industry sometimes. Like, it's beyond me. It's beyond me. But regardless, Hannah Montana, and so by extension, Miley Cyrus, was treasured around the globe by kids and their parents alike. One parent, for example, is quoted as saying, "Miley is such a great influence on people. I listen to her lyrics and her lyrics are so positive. Some people say she's a young Britney Spears, but I hope she remains Miley Cyrus." And she did. Miley did remain herself, except herself grew up. So she didn't remain herself in the way that a lot of people wanted or expected, because kids don't stay kids forever. And so Miley did change. She grew into herself more, and people didn't necessarily like that. But then on the other side of things, Miley didn't necessarily like some of the things that she had done when she was younger that didn't align with her anymore, including playing Hannah Montana. Basically, Miley commented that as she got older, the show was very childish, and Miley kind of said that Hannah's childish nature became less and less like an extension of her own as she grew up, and so she really stopped feeling connected to the character in the way that she initially did, but especially that kicked in when she had sex for the first time. And she's like genuinely spoken about this, which is why I'm saying it, but Miley recalled that, "I remember thinking this is going to be very awkward now to wear tutus and Doc Martens. I remember one of the directors was like, it's like now the lion's been let out of its cage and it's seen where it's come from, and you're going to have a really hard time walking yourself back into the zoo." And so Miley continued, she said, "There I go, like, you know, you see the lion and it's not walking itself, it's on a chained collar and it's being dragged or prodded into the thing, and you're gonna have to do that." And I remember just kind of going like, now I feel like I'm a little bit of a fraud, because these kids are looking at me at this kind of sexless thing, and now that I know what all of this is, it feels a little bit sillier putting on the wig now. So it was a bit of a janky quote, but the gist of it is that Miley had grown up too quickly, honestly, because of the fact that she was on Hannah Montana, but that ended up being what broke her bond with the show, as she grew up so fast that she shed her childish skin and she was like, this is not me anymore. And she probably did that when she was like 16. Or at least that's when I'd say it really started, especially in the public eye. It seemed like the battle between forced childishness and premature maturity had played out, and premature maturity had won by the time Miley was 16. So this was 2009 at this point. And Miley was starting to explore, I suppose, but she wasn't really in any normal sort of scene. And so her explorations were kind of concerning, because I don't even know this happened, but I came across TMZ. They released this video of Miley dancing raunchily with a 45-year-old director and producer named Adam Shankman. And this was at a rap party for a movie that she did. It was called The Last Song. And Adam produced that, which is why obviously they were at the rap party together. And Adam, notably, I have to say, is gay, and he was openly gay even back then in 2009. But still, that doesn't change the fact that, to me, that's kind of a weird thing for any 45-year-old to be doing, whether you're sexually attracted to the gender of the person that you're dancing with or not. That's still inappropriate. But then also in 2009, Miley, she caught flack, and you might remember this because this was actually like big news for some reason, but she like barely pole danced at the Teen Choice Awards. She like stood on an ice cream cart and held a pole and did some dance moves, and she held the pole so like she didn't fall off the cart. I don't know, it was a big nothing burger of an outrage. I think anyone looking back now could say that, but at the time I guess it felt significant because everyone was talking about it. Oh my god, Miley Cyrus pole danced. No, she didn't. And even if she did, it's an art form, good core strength, you know what I mean? Anyway, moving on to the time Miley was 17. This is behind the scenes. I don't think this was really public knowledge at the time, although maybe there was some speculation. But Miley has said that she was smoking a lot of weed and taking a lot of shrooms. And in her own words, she said that she was starting to go a bit cray-cray. And one example that she shared of, you know, how the substances were affecting her and how she was sort of losing her mind a little bit was that she crashed her car into a gate. Like, I guess she was like coming home or somewhere and she drove straight into a gate. And she was with her boyfriend at the time. So she started going off at him for making her crash into the, like, this is your fault and I blame you and blah blah blah. And later she was like, I was the one driving the car. But that paints the picture, right, that Miley was clearly quite highly strung. At that point, she was not really grounded in reality, and she was generally just not doing too hot. Things had really caught up to her. But it was kind of a weird time because Miley had had these scandals, and I'm sure there was some speculation about what she was doing behind the scenes, but her image in the media was generally still being pushed as being very cookie cutter. Like, she was still with Disney. She still had to try, at least, to get good PR. So there was this article that I saw on Hollywood Life, and it recorded that a source said that at Hannah Montana's rap party, Miley had a special tea in her honor she drank the Hannah Montana blend, which is a blonde tea with ginger and lemon, used to soothe the vocal cords. She also had the Miley Stewart blend, which is a tea reminiscent of the sweet tea from Tennessee. And so, on this article, the journalist concluded that the young starlet didn't pull a Lindsay Lohan. But, as we know, behind the scenes, But luckily for Miley, again, this was like maybe the one saving grace that she had, was her parents did stay in her corner. They didn't abandon her as she grew older and a little bit more, reckless, and Miley actually remembered that Tish sort of didn't stop parenting her until she was like 20. So Miley was definitely out of control, and she was getting away with way too much for a teenager, but it was like a weird power dynamic. I don't know. Her mum didn't let her run totally off the hook, but Miley had such an outrageous amount of control over her life and so much freedom. For a young person, she was expected to be in places that normally a teenager would not be. So there was a lot of push and pull there where it was like, well, I don't know what I'd do if I was parenting a teenager under those circumstances, because how harsh can you be? I don't know. When they're like, listen, I'm going out and I'm working and I've got my own job. Like, for example, Miley said that Tish used to confiscate Miley's phone when she was like 17, 18, 19, 20, and Miley would be like, how can you take that when I'm paying for it? And Tish would be like, shut up. I gave birth to you. I gave you life. Like, you're just gonna have to do what I say. And as frustrating as that was at the time for both of them, I'm sure, Miley looks back at that fondly now. She respects what her mum was doing for her. And I think that even at the time when I'm sure that was really annoying and really honestly insulting, where it's like, Mum, I'm living my own life. I think that Miley probably did need somebody to care for her in that sort of normal way. Because Miley, from day dot, really, she was used to living an extraordinary life. Miley later phrased it as, she was born into this fishbowl, and then she chose to stay in that fishbowl with the career that she undertook. And in doing that, she said that she went from having it all as a kid, she had this massive family farm and plenty of money and not many concerns, to having even more as a young person. And so for one, Miley has said that she's always kind of carried that guilt around that, when maybe it didn't feel fair that she had everything that she had, or that she was in the places that she was. But then on top of that, Miley has also felt very alien around most people, because she doesn't share life experiences with the majority of people on this planet, right? Like, she can't relate to most people. And on the other hand, they could never relate to her. How could we possibly understand exactly what she'd gone through? Do you know what I mean? In the same way that we couldn't really expect her to understand what we've gone through. So Miley did need help grounding herself. She didn't really have the right people around her to do that. She felt like she couldn't hang out with your quote unquote normal people. And I guess that's what parents are for. And so they did step up a little bit in terms of that. But then also, Miley needed help taking care of herself still at this age, when she was like 17. And I guess it's a weird dichotomy, because we spoke about this battle of like forced childishness and premature maturity, but Miley was somewhere in the middle of that. And the dichotomy was weird, because Miley felt so grown up, of course, because she had, the career and the money to prove it. Who was going to say that she wasn't all grown up? But then she was still so immature in a lot of ways. She still couldn't really handle herself or her life, not on her own, that's for sure. Like, Miley, she recalled this time that she came home from tour. She'd been away on tour with her mum and her Grammy, and her dad, Billy Ray, was absolutely gobsmacked when he saw her, and it was to the point that he almost didn't let her go back out on the road again, because she'd gotten so scarily thin while she was away, and he was like, what happened to you? But what happened wasn't anything necessarily nefarious. I'm sure there might have been something behind it where it was like, I want to be very thin, or having that feeling of like control in your life. But Miley said that honestly, she was just surviving on like cheese and turkey slices and stuff, because she reminisced that she said that, growing up in the South with a sort of rural family, I mean, obviously that's a generalization, but this is just what she said, her family didn't really understand nutrition, and she just never took it upon herself to learn that. I don't know, like, did they not have coaches for that sort of thing? I'm surprised that they didn't, to be honest with you. Or maybe I'm not, because it was probably like coffee diet preferred, as thin as possible preferred, because we're talking about like the 2000s. But I did come across this video that kind of confirms that they had no nutritional, whether it's knowledge or like care, I don't know, but Miley spoke about how she ate like Doritos and stuff for breakfast, and her dad, Billy Ray, and Emily Osment, they just like sat there unflinching, because I guess it was common knowledge that, yeah, Miley did eat that stuff, and they didn't necessarily, her dad obviously didn't see a problem with it.
What'd you have for breakfast this morning?
I haven't eaten breakfast. Oh, yes I did. Yes I did.
It's always interesting.
I had Doritos.
See?
Sun chips.
See?
There was pretzels and then Cheetos. Wait, did I say
It's
Cheetos?
always something.
Yeah,
the
Doritos,
other day it was like
Sun chips,
Skittles
Cheetos.
or something. Oh no,
Yeah,
you don't eat Skittles.
I had the other day. I had that chocolate chip muffin. Yeah, you know what? Breakfast is the one time that you can just have something really gross, because you're just like,
because you have the rest of the day to just burn it off.
burn it off.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
exactly.
Yeah, I ate some chips.
Good.
Do not look at me as a role model for food, because I'm bad eater.
But then at the same time, where it became really, really harmful is that Miley was putting her body and her mind under so much stress, and she was practically training like an athlete. She was doing all these shows and stuff like that, and so she wasn't fueling her body properly, like, at all. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she even rolled out of bed in the morning, because she must have felt like shit. But finally, in 2010, a lot of things sort of came to a crossroads for Miley, because that's when Hannah Montana concluded. And Miley, to say she was grateful to be able to move on from that would be an understatement. She was itching to let go of the Hannah Montana image, and probably all of the work that came along with being under Disney's thumb. But from what I've heard, the final season of Hannah Montana was imagined as being this big, glorious, long exit from the Disney Channel, and it ended up actually being pretty short and snappy, and we'll talk about why with each individual cast member. But overall, the vibe was that the cast were just ready to part ways with the show. They had so many other things they wanted to be doing. They had so many other things that they were doing as well. And looking back, Miley later said, "I liked being in the Disney universe because I didn't know anything else. I knew I was getting to live what I wanted to do, but I think now that I'm older, I realize that's a lot to put on a kid." And the side effects of Miley carrying that huge amount of weight that was put on her shoulders became readily apparent within just a few months of Hannah Montana rapping. Because Miley Cyrus, she wasn't completely free, but she was much more free than she had previously been. Her life was changing. Now, it wasn't just her changing, it was her surroundings changing, her circumstances were changing. And so naturally, things sort of started to arise. And one was an infamous clip. This was like late 2010, I think probably November 2010, and this clip of Miley ripping a bong on her 18th birthday started circulating online.
According to one source, they were smoking something called salvia.
Yes, salvia, a Mexican herb legal in California that can cause hallucinations when smoked. The DEA takes this stuff pretty seriously. In fact, they've classified salvia as a drug of concern.
And I remember this. I feel like I was quite disconnected from media and news and stuff like that when I was a kid. I just didn't really look into it. But I do remember seeing this when I was like 8 or 9, because I remember being like, team who cares? Like, I just didn't get the whole stir up about it. I was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it was a really big deal because it was Miley Cyrus doing it, right? And Miley Cyrus was such big news. And so the idea that now Miley Cyrus was going off the rails, going crazy, doing some naughty illegal stuff, it really did affect Miley's career quite seriously, because it really, really altered the way that she was being seen in the public eye. And of course, this was the precursor to the Can't Be Tamed era, and then the Bangers era, and a whole lot of controversy surrounding Miley Cyrus, although we may look back now and think, oh, how silly. Miley's image was completely shifted pretty much from the moment this piece of media started going around. So there was this whole narrative that was going around with this bong video that Miley had like tarnished her reputation. Truly, she was only just starting to create her reputation. She'd just become an adult. She was building her reputation from the ground up. And naturally, of course, her interests were shifting a lot. She was exploring a lot. She was very much in the process of self-discovery, as most 18-year-olds are. But Miley did take on board sort of like the brevity of the situation of what she was choosing to do with her life, because she was a former Disney star. So years later, she said to Elle, she looked back and she was like, one time I went backstage at Disneyland and Peter Pan was smoking a cigarette. And I was like, that's me. That's the kind of dreams I'm crushing. And she said that's how everyone felt with the bong video, but I'm not a Disney mascot. I'm a person. Years later, we know that Miley has reinvented herself countless times, and she's spoken about how she really is that kind of person to sort of change her whole aesthetic and her whole outlook depending on what sort of like era she's in. And it's usually for the better, as in like she learns something and then she adjusts her life or her outlook or her persona to embrace this new positive thing that she's discovered about life. And even though her first couple years as being like an independent star, as just being Miley Cyrus in the pop space, were very rocky, as more and more distance grew between Miley Cyrus and her Disney Channel image, she did become more and more of a respected artist, which I'm glad about, because she has a brilliant voice and she clearly is passionate about making music. So it's a real shame that for so long her creative endeavors were like tarnished by the fact that she was this child star going wild. I don't know, you can definitely look back and see that she was struggling at certain points, but I wouldn't say that's like child star going off the rails. I'd say that's child star in need of help and guidance, perhaps. Update, just yesterday, as I'm editing this, Miley Cyrus actually did an interview with Variety in which she spoke about how she feels about her life and her past now. And it's really great news. She said that she gets so much of every single thing she wants. Miley is quoted as saying, "My relationship is private, my business is successful, and I get to have the small things that people take for granted, like waking up in my own bed and feeding my dogs. But," she said, "then I also get to be Hannah again and have people sobbing because they just saw This Is the Life live, and I love that I've curated my life that way." And this article concludes by saying, "It's not the best of both worlds, but something whole. It took 20 years to develop, but this is Cyrus's new theme song. I can actually have it all." So that is fantastic. But anyway, again, I'll drop you back into the video. Sorry to interrupt. But regardless of the hardships that Miley did endure because she was part of Hannah Montana, she does still revisit fond memories from the show every now and again. There's this like text conversation that she had with Jason Earls. She sent him a photo of her in a blonde wig and she's like, 10 years later and I still can't get rid of this thing, you know what I mean? So there's been a couple moments like that. But then also in 2021, this one's quite notable. It was the 15th anniversary of Hannah Montana, and Miley penned a letter reminiscing about those years of her life. In that letter, she said that Emily and Mitchel and Jason had become like family to her, and she said that she was beyond grateful for the opportunity that she had to breathe life into the character of Hannah Montana. In the end, she concluded that the show was the best gift a girl could ask for, so it clearly wasn't all bad for Miley. But of course we all know, I'm sure, that nostalgia can make things look a little bit more rosy in retrospect than they did in the moment. And recalling that side of things, you know, the pushback that Miley was met with when she was trying to find herself as a young person that happened to be in the public eye, she said, "People were so shocked by some of the things that I did, but it should be more shocking that when I was 11 or 12, I was put in full hair and makeup and a wig and told what to wear by a group of mostly older men." And speaking of older men and Miley Cyrus, that's genuinely what I wrote. This is meant to segue us into talking about Billy Ray. I'd been writing this script for too long at this point. I was like, I've just got to get on to the next thing. Now, Billy Ray had quite the interesting time working on Hannah Montana, is probably how I'd put it. Of course, he was one of the adult cast, and so his experience was naturally different from those of the child stars, but he was very intimately connected to the main star of the show, that being his daughter, Miley Cyrus, and he saw everything that she was going through. And I'd imagine that was probably hard on him, because even going back to square one, he always expressed that it was difficult for him to let his daughter take on such a big job, especially when she was barely in the double digits. Like, she was a tiny little girl when she started auditioning for Hannah Montana. And about that, in 2007, Billy Ray released a song entitled Ready, Set, Don't Go. He sung about the hunger that Miley had to leave her small town and chase her big dreams, and how hard it was for Billy Ray to accept that he had to bite his tongue and just let her do it. Basically, it was like, I have to hold back how I really feel because I can't pin my daughter down and stop her from living her life, and it's a really hard listen. There's this lyric that I remember reading, and it was something like, she's got the car all packed to leave and there's no room for me in there, and she's like 11, and it's like, oh my god. But then obviously Billy Ray sort of did get in that car, metaphorically. He got on that journey with his daughter and he starred in the same show that she was on. But the problem that came along with that was that Billy Ray didn't love living in LA, to put it lightly. He picked up this quote from his dad that almost became like a catchphrase for him. And it was basically that it's important to be present and be aware of where you're at in life. It's also important to look ahead and see where you want to go. But you should never forget where you came from. And where Billy Ray came from was a rural background, and he lived a decently slow and a decently modest life, and he liked that. So LA really was not his place. It didn't feel right in his bones for Billy Ray to be living in LA. But with that said, the gig that Billy Ray had in LA wasn't too bad. It wasn't the worst, was it? So Billy Ray did find things that he enjoyed about being in LA and being on the show of Hannah Montana, and one of those things was, well, he came to describe the show as being life imitating art, imitating life. And, you know, Billy Ray's character on the show was penned, I'd say, almost entirely in his image, really. So it was easy for him to play, and he liked to be able to keep it real. That was another thing he said all the time, was that he wanted to keep it real, and, you know, playing essentially himself on the show of Hannah Montana was keeping it pretty real, he felt. But then on top of that, the show also fostered a really tight relationship between Billy Ray and Miley, which is exactly what Billy Ray strived for as a dad. He told people that my definition of being a father is being a best friend. That's what my dad was to me, and that's what I've tried to be for my kids. He said, what Miley and I do on Hannah Montana is almost exactly what we do with me being her daddy in real life. I think one of the hooks of the show is the realism between Miley and myself, and we love it. And even off the soundstage, behind the scenes, Billy Ray appreciated the little things, that he was able to drive to the same workplace every day with his daughter, and at that workplace he could watch from essentially the front line as she flourished at every little thing that she put her mind to. And he was there for her, Billy Ray got to hold Miley's hand through the daily routines of work and life until she was able to break away and find her independence. And even then, as she did become more independent, he still got to work with her, he got to act with her and sing with her, collaborate with her, which had always been a hallmark of their relationship ever since Miley was a tiny little tot. So it kept them really close, and Billy Ray and Miley Cyrus did have some really special bonding moments, thanks to Hannah Montana. But that doesn't mean it was all smooth sailing. Billy Ray did run into some minor controversy, at least in the public eye. Like, for example, this was the kind of thing that he was getting rolled up in, was in 2008, basically, he was shown in the Hannah Montana Miley Cyrus Best of Both Worlds concert tour, behind the scenes doco, whatever it was, and he was sitting in this moving vehicle with Miley, and neither of them were wearing a seatbelt, which is kind of like, if your daughter's not putting her seatbelt on, then you should really be telling her to as the dad. You should also be setting the example. So that didn't look good on him, and he issued this apology about how they got caught up in the moment of filming and they made a mistake and they forgot to buckle their seatbelts, which did not go down well with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Surprisingly. Not a good excuse, I guess. But Billy, he also had to make a statement about the fact that he did not delete Lindsay Lohan's number from Miley's phone after Ryan Seacrest said that he did in a radio interview. So basically everything that Billy Ray was getting in trouble for in the public eye was relatively minor, wasn't it? And it always, from what I saw, related to Miley. Because although Billy Ray's image was generally positive, it was very much attached to his daughters. Like I said, everything about their family life was just way too broadcasted, from parenting styles to conversations they had between each other. So it went that if Miley was going well, then so was Billy Ray. If Miley wasn't going so well, then Billy Ray was suddenly fighting fires. But pre-2010, that was mostly fine, because Miley hadn't really publicly gone, I guess, astray yet, is what people probably thought, like, oh, she's gone crazy. And so when Miley said this about her dad, she said, people can rat on him and say he's not raising me right or whatnot, but I feel like if people went to a normal high school and saw the way that 90% of kids act, they would say my dad's a really good dad. At that point, pre-2010, it was believable, which is illustrated in this article from 2009, which read, under her father's watchful eye, Miley has mostly avoided the public embarrassments and missteps that dog young stars. But that was a bit preemptive, right? Because then Miley did start changing. And every time she was perceived as acting out in the press, Billy Ray would have to put out some kind of statement supporting his daughter in some way. It was like shielding her, if you will. Like TMZ, for example, they released that video that we spoke about of Miley dancing on Adam Shankman, and Billy Ray spoke on that, and he said it's what people her age do. She was just having fun. And then Miley, she danced with that pole on that ice cream cart at the Teen Choice Awards, and Billy Ray said, I just think that Miley loves entertaining people. So he was like constantly defending his daughter and also his parenting choices, which can't have been very enjoyable. I can't imagine there are many parents out there that would thrive on doing that. But still, in hindsight, Billy Ray has said that being in that part of Miley's life, he said, has been one of the most rewarding events of my life. Billy Ray treasured watching the kids on that set grow, both professionally and personally, and he remembered even in 2024 that he loved doing that show. But he definitely did not always feel that way. And there was actually a particularly rocky era in Billy's life that he sort of ran headfirst into in 2010, and it just shook up his entire view of everything. To be honest, it left him feeling more lost and alone than he had in years. And that came to the public's attention in an interview that Billy Ray did with GQ. In this article, it reads, in January 2010, shooting for Hannah Montana's final episodes began, and it quotes Billy Ray as saying, season 4 was a disaster. I was going to work every single day knowing that my family had fallen apart, but yet I had to sit in front of that camera. I look back and I go, how did I even make it through that? I must be a better actor than I thought. And so Billy Ray had a terrible time in life while he was filming season 4 of Hannah Montana, and by 2011 he said that he'd come to resent the show for what it did to his family. Well, that's what he told GQ anyway. But for some important exposition, at this point in the late 2010s, Billy Ray had filed for a divorce from his wife, Miley's mother, Tish. They cited irreconcilable differences, and that signified the cracks that had formed in their nearly 20-year marriage behind the scenes that the public really hadn't been privy to. So it was pretty big news because it was surprising, and honestly nobody really knew what was going on behind closed doors between Billy Ray and Tish. Soon enough, of course, rumors hit the headlines. So Tish was accused of cheating on Billy Ray with Bret Michaels of the band Poison. Bret fervently denied that had happened, and Tish in later years, I mentioned this in the previous video, but she said that she was like practically a single parent during her marriage to Billy Ray, so it sounds like maybe they weren't functioning as a team for quite some time, and maybe it wasn't so surprising that they decided to divorce, and you know, there might have been a couple things going on. So all that really became clear in the aftermath of those divorce papers being filed was that Billy Ray was miserable that his family had broken apart, because that's what he spoke about with GQ. And then on top of that, of course, he mentioned that he'd just become privy to the fact that his daughter was doing drugs, thanks to that viral video that went around in late 2010. It was like salt in the wound for Billy Ray. He was like, great, this and now this. And it made him question everything, because for decades you can go back and you can see that Billy had prided himself on his psychology-based, connection-focused parenting style. It wasn't like gentle parenting necessarily, but like maybe it had the bones of it. Do you know what I mean? So he was quoted as saying things like, I'll be there through thick and thin. I want to be Miley's best friend. I want to be the person she comes to for help when she makes that mistake. Which is fair enough. It's good if you can strike a balance there, right? Where it's like, you can come and talk to me about anything, but you are going to get grounded if you do something bad. But regardless, when Billy Ray said those things, he simply could not have foreseen the tumultuous journey that Miley had waiting for her in both her public and her private life. And that really shifted Billy Ray's outlook. So about the bong video, he tweeted, sorry guys, I had no idea. Just saw this stuff for the first time myself. I'm so sad. There is so much beyond my control right now. Which reads very depressed, doesn't it? It's a very sad tweet. But then about his relationship with Miley, Billy Ray told GQ that the business was driving a wedge between us. And from there, he recalled that, you know, he said a lot that he tried hard to be a friend to his kids, and other parents would actually, they'd chime in and they'd say, well, you don't need to be a friend to them, you need to be a parent to them. And he'd sort of brushed that off, but at this point, Billy Ray lamented that, wow, I'm the first guy to say to them right now, you were right. I should have been a better parent. I should have said enough is enough. It's getting dangerous and somebody's going to get hurt. I should have, but I didn't. Honestly, I didn't know the ball was out of bounds until it was way up in the stands somewhere. And about his relationship with Miley, he continued to say, of course, I've sent her the texts of I'm here if you need me, always still love you, those kinds of things. And she's coming to this house, the house that he was in Tennessee at that point, for Christmas in a few days. So he said, I'll see her when she gets here and hopefully there's something I can do. I don't know, who knows? Maybe she knows exactly what she's doing. And he said, I've done some stupid crap. I do stupid crap, we all do, but it's different when you sit back and you see it happening to your little girl. I feel like I gotta try. It's my daughter. And some of these handlers are perhaps more interested in handling Miley's money than her safety and her career, which is really sad. But as much as Billy Ray unconditionally loved his daughter, he had nothing kind to say about his experience on the Disney Channel at that point. No, nothing. Billy Ray complained that he was massively underpaid for his work on the show. He said, I knew I was working for peanuts. I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I know the difference. I went from $12,000 a week to, after 4 years and the millions that they make, $15,000 a week? Hell yeah. Which I know, like, the big corporation is greedy and taking all the money, and like, comparatively, he should have been making more. But damn, what I wouldn't do for even $12,000 a week. Like, if Billy Ray doesn't want it, I hope I'm up for consideration. I'll take it. But I would not take it if I had to swap and be in their position. No. But either way, Billy also said that when it came to the Disney Channel, he was sick of playing Superman, basically, for them whenever Miley got caught up in bad press. He concluded that he actually felt very used over that, because he was being asked constantly to tell the public that things were okay, when honestly, sometimes they were not okay. So he endorsed a lot of things that maybe he looked back and regretted endorsing, or he, you know, sent the thumbs up sign to people all around the world, when really it was a bit more like a sideways thumb, a downwards thumb, you know. And then all of this came to a head for Billy with this stupid video of Miley ripping a bong, because Billy Ray had heard that Miley's team were frantically trying to erase the existence of this video that painted her in a real bad light. Apparently, she'd like lost her phone, and then they started stressing about this video, and they started trying to like confiscate other people's devices and remove this video from them. So they were working on that behind the scenes, and then when Billy Ray questioned, you know, what's the video, what's the big issue, he was told that it was none of his business, and that really did not sit right with him. Because as Billy Ray put it, he said, I'm dealing with somebody that had only known my daughter for possibly 4 years, and I'm her daddy. I was pretty damn insulted. I took that as the ultimate alarm. It's none of your business. None of my business that you're out running around LA trying to buy kids' computers and phones because there's something about my daughter. Which I understand, like I understand these are big things to grapple with, and it makes parenting in general difficult when your child is wrapped up in stuff like this. So I understand why he was so, because he did come off as quite like rambly and sort of lost in the interview. And I mean, imagining everything that he'd been going through and stuff like that, understandable, Billy Ray. But throughout this interview, he just kind of sounded like he couldn't quite wrap his head around where and when things went wrong. So he was just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck, and he was getting teary-eyed. He was rattling away a bunch of stories and anecdotes. It was all a bit jumbled. But in the end, he did keep coming back to one thing, and that was probably the thing that was the biggest part of the Cyrus's lives for the past 5 years or so, and it was Hannah Montana. He felt like Hannah Montana blew up their lives. As Billy Ray put it, the damn show destroyed my family. He said, I hate to say it, but I'd take it back in a second. For my family to be here and just everybody to be okay, safe and sound and happy and normal would have been fantastic. Heck yeah, I'd erase it all in a second if I could. So I guess, you know, Billy Ray, he had to find something to blame for their circumstances, and Hannah Montana was it. It seemed to be the deciding factor in all of these terrible things going wrong. But now looking back, I think that it's fair to say that Billy Ray's statements about the show were more convoluted than they might have come across on the surface, because they were pretty cut and dry. It was the show. But they weren't really that cut and dry. Like, they were the words of a man steeped in misery. So, of course, it was going to come off a bit drastic. Do you know what I mean? And this was sad. This was like one of the last quotes from the article, but the journalist was, I think, trying to like exit Billy Ray's house or something like that, and he accidentally stood in front of Miley Cyrus's childhood bedroom. And Billy Ray sort of peered in there, and he said for the interviewer, you know, look in there. And then Billy Ray said, again, it's a bit sad, because it's just a little girl's room, isn't it? Yeah, so that was a very upsetting read, but I do think, like I said, that Billy Ray's judgment was being marred by his upsetting circumstances. Because looking back, Billy Ray spoke to people. This was actually like just sort of after his GQ interview came out, and he told people that some of his statements to GQ that he made were explosive and unintentionally so. And then later in 2011, Billy Ray said that, I feel like I got my Miley back in a way. I feel like we are the daddy and daughter that we were before Hannah Montana happened. So it was kind of just a rough stage in his life that we caught Billy in, and then Hannah Montana caught the flack for it, right? Even Tish in 2024 on the Call Her Daddy podcast, she looked back on that time in their lives, and she said that she felt like Hannah Montana absolutely did not destroy their family. Actually, she said, we're doing great. I think he was just having a moment. And I'd say he definitely was, but that was not Billy Ray's last moment, and it was probably not, it wasn't his worst, I wouldn't say either. Because actually, Hannah Montana wasn't the only entity that broke things apart in Billy Ray's life. Sometimes it was Hannah Montana that brought things together, and he broke them apart himself. And basically, this is me sliding us into our next story. So it goes that Billy Ray was filming the final season of the Hannah Montana show in 2010, and he was not doing well. His life was falling to pieces, and there, during that time in his life, this 49-year-old Billy Ray Cyrus came across a 21-year-old girl named Fire Rose. And Billy recalled that he'd taken his dog out on the lot one day, and then Fire Rose came out the front door. She'd just had an audition, and he said about that first sighting, there was almost a moment of, I don't know, recognition. I was like, this girl's a star. And so Fire Rose, I don't know if she initiated this or he did, but she came over to pet Billy Ray's dog, and they got to talking from there. Billy Ray was like, don't ever take a strange man up on this offer, but in my case, this case, my dog will testify that you'll be totally safe. I'm going to introduce you to a producer, and you can kind of make yourself at home and watch us rehearse, and, you know, maybe it might lead into a role or just another contact at Disney. So this is how Billy Ray painted it, like 15 years later. pretty much, that he looked at Fire Rose and was like, oh, you're going to be so successful, let me line you up with the right people. I don't know if that was really what he was thinking at the time. But either way, Fire Rose, I mean, she couldn't pass up that offer to literally get to network with Disney, the cast and the crew on one of the biggest shows on Disney. And so she did follow Billy Ray's lead onto set. And from there, Fire Rose and Billy Ray became fast friends, which is a little bit odd in the sense that she was closer in age to the kids working on the show. She was 21. They were like 17, 18, 19 at the time, but her and Billy Ray bonded. I don't know. I don't think it would be odd for them to be friends if what happened next didn't happen. And listen, she was an adult at this point. She was just a young person compared to, I reckon, I mean, this is just me assuming because I am not 49 years old yet, but I'd think that when I'm 49 years old, I will probably look back at even me at this age. I'm 23. And I'll be like, oh, a baby. So I don't know. But Billy Ray, for some reason, confided in this 21 to like late 20s year old girl. She supported him during his divorce proceedings. And the reason I said 21 to like late 20s was because this happened a couple times. So she supported him through the first divorce proceedings, and then Tish and Billy Ray got back together again, and then they started divorce proceedings again, and then they got back together again, and then they finally divorced for good in 2022. Tish remarried not long down the line, and she is quite happy in her marriage from what I've heard her say. She finally feels valued and like she has a good partnership with a man. But we're not talking about Tish. She wasn't on Hannah Montana. We're talking about Billy Ray, unfortunately. So in that same year of 2022, Fire Rose and Billy Ray took their relationship from being friends and being songwriting partners to being life partners. In no time at all, they were married. And just as quickly, they divorced. And we do now have some insight into Fire Rose's experience being married to Billy Ray for all of 7 months, and it did not look good. Okay, I'm going to interrupt myself before I get into this next segment because I realized that I didn't really paint you a full picture of what was going on, but Fire Rose has spoken out about what she endured during her marriage to Billy Ray. She's posted, for example, a video of the way that he was speaking to her, and it's not good. I'm not going to play it for you just in case someone is listening and they can't skip it and it's not going to work out for them, but you can see it on the screen. What Billy Ray said was that Fire Rose was like a fraud. I don't know. There's a couple different things I could pull from, but I'm going to read you this Instagram story that he posted. And it says, hell yeah, I was at my wit's end. As every day went by, I started realizing something was wrong, and that's before I knew she was a fraud. I just knew something wasn't right. That was before I knew she was David Hodges' ex-wife. That was before I knew her parents' last name. I had no idea she was arrested for felony residential burglary. I saw before my very own eyes everything I thought I knew about her was a lie. She was trying to take over my career, my life, and usurp the Cyrus name for her own gain. See you in court, he said. Now, do we know what happened behind closed doors? No. Would it be understandable if Billy Ray was disillusioned by the marriage and wanted to leave because of what he was saying in the Instagram story? Sure. But was he a fully grown man that did not need to speak to anybody that way to prove a point or get anything done? Yes, he was. It seems like the relationship was very unhealthy. Again, we were not there, but I think the fairest judgment that I could make in this situation would be that Billy Ray certainly spoke to her in an inappropriate and damaging way. And this sort of manner of speaking seems to be a trait of Billy Ray's when it comes to his relationship partners, judging by the fact that we have this text of him talking about Tish. And he calls her a liar, a cheat, a complete skank, scum of the earth, a fraud, makes Deanna Lohan look like Mother Teresa, Stepcest is about to blow up in the bitch's face, is what he said. So, Tish is also I don't know. I can only imagine that this was more frequent behind closed doors than we could see as the public. I also should add that Billy Ray filed for divorce from Fire Rose. He cited irreconcilable differences and inappropriate marital conduct. A Daily Mail article documented that after an increasingly bitter and public breakup, during which each accused the other of verbal and emotional abuse, court documents signed on Monday and obtained exclusively by Daily Mail show that Fire Rose walked away with $0. According to a source that's fine by her, this insider said she settled for nothing just to be done with him and get away from the situation. And now we can continue knowing that you have a slightly better understanding of the entire big picture of what was going on. What was going on in the media, at least. What was going on that we were privy to as the public. But sort of recently, actually, Fire Rose posted a TikTok with the caption on screen, "In your 20s, you'll meet a 49-year-old man that convinces you you're his soulmate. It's very important that you don't believe him." And in the description, Fire Rose wrote, "If you've survived narcissistic abuse, you're not alone. It's chilling how similar survivors' experiences really are. Behind closed doors, it's always the same playbook. Control, isolation, rage, manipulation, walking on eggshells, cognitive dissonance, feeling like you're the only person in the world that can be experiencing what you are. You are far stronger than you think. Love is always still real, even if what you're experiencing right now is abuse." So that is really, really upsetting, and it's definitely disappointing to see what became of Billy Ray Cyrus. It just seems like his life and his mental state went further and further downhill following the conclusion of Hannah Montana. But, I mean, that cannot and does not justify what it sounds like he's done. But that's kind of all I have to say about Billy Ray. So what about the rest of the main cast members? What about Emily Osment? Well, Emily always maintained, and this is like magical considering that she was born and raised into show business, but she always said that she thought of show business as being a job and not a lifestyle. But as much as, of course, you know, Emily can be credited for having that desire herself, I do think as well that the sort of mindset that she had with that could be very much attributed to her family, because her mum was an English teacher and she instilled the importance of education into her kids, and also, you know, she was like, creative fulfillment is important, but so is having a life, like a private, safe life. And Emily's dad was on board with that notion that, you know, his kids could get involved in the industry enough to work in it, but they shouldn't dive in so deep that it was everything to them. It like engulfed their life. So Emily's dad actually told the New York Times that he worked hard to, quote, keep his daughter grounded as she pursues her ambitions. That's what it said in the article. But regardless of what caused Emily to think this way or feel this way, having a private life was hugely important to her. It was like a non-negotiable. So even though it did make her life harder, inarguably, Emily made the effort to stay in regular school for quite some time. And it was difficult. Basically, Hannah Montana was shot for maybe 3 weeks out of every month, and so Emily could only attend school for 1 week of the month most of the time. Her school was like an hour away, and obviously she was busy during the days when she was working, and so she just couldn't be there. And that meant that Emily had excessive amounts of work to do, both at home and on set, just whenever basically she could find the time to cram in some schoolwork. And of course, this was before online schooling systems and stuff like that, and so Emily would have to like fax in or mail in her completed work to her school, which was definitely extra admin. Emily was practically working herself to the bone trying to keep up with her career and school. And even then, with all the work she was doing, she'd still get back to school and play catch up. It was a lot, like she just couldn't do it all. But she managed it the best she could because Emily really did value having normal childhood experiences. Like, she didn't want to just be this famous like superstar. She wanted to attend homecoming. She wanted to date non-celebrities. She appreciated that she had friends that just lived regular lives. And also, Emily loved school. She had a really good time at high school and she had great friends there, and of course she didn't want to lose that. So Emily, she knew that the boundaries that she was choosing to draw were unusual for the industry, but she didn't care if she was abnormal. She really wanted to stay grounded. I don't know. And her parents definitely, again, they encouraged that and they added to that. We're like, I mean, yes, Emily was in spaces that you wouldn't expect a kid to be normally. She was out partying and stuff like that, but she looked back at her Hannah Montana days and she was like, I was barely out doing that kind of stuff, because Emily said that she had a curfew. She wasn't allowed to attend the ridiculous parties. In a lot of ways, Emily was just like a normal teenager, and she spoke in interviews about how when she was at home, she wasn't all dolled up, she wasn't wearing nice outfits or makeup or anything like that. She was just running around being a kid. And so Emily lived quite the split life, honestly, probably more so than Miley Cyrus did. You know, Emily was kind of like the Hannah Montana of that friend group. And as much as that was very taxing for Emily, it was also very healthy for her, and she felt like the positive benefits of that. And so, as we know, because I think I said this exact thing in the previous episode, but Emily sort of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of Hannah Montana. Of course, she cared about the show and she put a lot of time and effort into being on that show, but she was always invested in other things in her life as well. And so the show was more like a really cool thing that she was doing. So she felt blessed to be a part of the show, setting herself up for her future, but also having a lot of fun. And she also really enjoyed the variety that the show presented her with. So she spoke about doing stunts very fondly. Like, she said within a week she fell over the back of a couch and she was hit by a surfboard and she had to fall over and she was hit by a frisbee. And she just liked that it was always different and interesting and there was like a little challenge and a little bit of fun physical comedy. And also Emily thought it was pretty neat that she did have a little tiny bit of creative control. Like, she had a little bit of a say in what direction certain things on Hannah Montana went in. Well, for one, because the show's writers would actually approach the younger cast members and they'd sort of be like, guys, is this cool what we've written? Do you guys really say stuff like, yo, do you really wear this and do you really listen to this? Like, do we sound hip, guys? And the kids would sort of direct the script writers that didn't really know what the kids liked, and the writers would listen, obviously, they'd value their input. And then also Emily did kind of feel like her character Lily matured with her to some extent, where Miley kind of felt like she outgrew the childishness of Hannah Montana, Miley Stewart at some point. Emily said that Lily started off the show as being really, really immature, but she did kind of manage to level her up over the years. So she was given a little bit of free rein to develop Lily as a character. And then Emily really fondly reminisced on this one time that she came to set wearing an outfit that she'd like just picked out for herself to wear, and Hannah Montana's deputy producer was sitting with the costume designer and he went, stop, I love what you're wearing, we need to do exactly what you're wearing for Lily. And so that was nice because now she kind of felt like Lily embodied her a little bit more, and it was generally stuff like that that made growing up on a kids show a little bit more bearable for Emily. And there were other things that stuck with her as well, like Emily mentioned the rush that she got from filming in front of a live audience, and she seemed to be pretty fond of that feeling. She said, you know, if you're not nervous before you get out there, then you're probably not doing it right. But then also she said, you know, she liked her castmates. She said that every day on set was kind of like this funny family gathering, because everyone on Hannah Montana obviously had become so comfortable with each other that their relationships were just ripe with like teasing and joking, and it was enjoyable. They made some great memories as a cast all together. Like, Emily reminisced on how they'd show up to the set in their pajamas sometimes and they'd like spend their lunch breaks just doing stuff together. So they'd like play Guitar Hero or they'd put on music and dance around in Miley's dressing room, and it was just, you know, hanging out. And Emily did recall that none of the cast were really big pranksters, so they didn't really do any like practical joking or anything like that, anything totally irresponsible. But there was this one time that during filming, her and Miley switched wigs and then they waited for somebody to point it out, and that I think they really got a kick out of. They said they maybe got like 5 seconds into being on the soundstage and someone was like, what are you doing? And we spoke about in the last episode the feud that Miley and Emily had. So Miley revealed in her book Miles to Go that they actually didn't get along well when filming first commenced for Hannah Montana, but as much as the media tried to pit Miley and Emily against each other after that, you know, they tried to like poke and prod and find some drama deep down in their friendship, it just wasn't, there was nothing there, because they didn't hate each other, they never hated each other. And once they sort of overcame their differences and found some shared confidence, they did become pretty tight friends. And so there was this interviewer, they asked Emily what it was like to be overshadowed by Miley. Those were the exact words they used, like they didn't even try to water it down. And Emily, she could have taken that the wrong way, but she just started laughing. She was like, yeah, the only way I'm overshadowed by Miley is in terms of height. She says she's like 5'7", but I swear she's taller. And then she did actually answer the question that the interviewer was hoping to have answered, but she did not give the answer I'm sure that they were expecting, or that they were like crossing their fingers for, because she was like, I don't feel overshadowed by Miley at all. I feel supportive of my friend, not envious of her. And Emily was like, we don't compete. Do you know what I mean? We're different people living different lives, doing different things, which is a very sensible answer. And she was only like 17 at the time, so kudos to her. But I think that Emily was particularly good at answering those pressing questions because she had the perspective that it was weird. It was weird that people would ask these things of people in the public eye. And it also felt strange to Emily that public figures could be known so deeply by strangers. So she'd speak about the fact that like any regular person on the street might know where a celebrity lives, or they might know what their kids' names are, or what breed of dog they have. That just kind of skeeved Emily out. And Emily just really treasured having her peace in life. So I remember seeing that she wasn't a big fan of cell phones, especially as they got smarter. So they were talking about, like, there was this interview that she did, and she very hesitantly admitted when she was asked that she did have a BlackBerry. And she said, like, I like it fine, but she just wasn't keen on the fact that she was reachable 24/7. She didn't like that. She wasn't that type of gal. I think she just preferred to live a bit of a quiet life, surrounded by trustworthy peers that didn't care about her job or who she was, and that respected her limits and her boundaries. And luckily, because she did value that and she did choose that path for herself in life, and also probably because she wasn't like the main huge star that Disney was trying to push out to the world, Emily didn't really succumb to the same pressures that Miley was shouldering. Not so much, at least. It existed, but she just never let herself be swallowed by the industry. So when she was asked certain questions, it was like, there was an interviewer asked, you know, how does it feel to be a role model to girls all over the world? And Emily was like, well, I more rely on my close friends and my family to keep me in line. She said that I care more about being a good inspiration to my little cousins and, you know, keeping their mum happy by not doing anything wild and giving them the wrong impression of what they should do as an older teenager than I care about influencing young girls that I'm not familiar with all around the world, right? So her image was worldwide, but her view was more like, what's right in front of me, what's really important to me. And because Emily didn't let herself get wrapped up in that world too much, she felt very normal in her everyday life, to the point that actually sometimes she'd forget what she did for work. Like, she'd recall times where she'd find herself wondering, like, why are these girls staring at me? And then she'd be like, oh, duh, because I'm on Hannah Montana, that's right. But Emily did say that generally she could go out with like a hat and sunglasses on, maybe a scarf, and not be recognized. Sometimes they'd figure out who she was, but a lot of the time, unless she was out somewhere with Miley, she was fine. She didn't really have to deal with people crowding her or paparazzi. So I think that Emily dealt with less of the negatives of being a public figure overall compared to Miley Cyrus, which is a fantastic thing. But that doesn't mean that things were always easy for Emily, and especially it was quite difficult for her to balance work and study and her privacy, because she was still a young actress on Disney and her life was still crazy and chaotic. In 2020, she posted a nostalgic photo to Instagram and she recalled, I spent a couple hundred Friday nights on set instead of all the places a normal teenager should have been, and it made me an adult faster than I could prepare myself for. However, I am grateful to have been handed a sense of accountability and purpose at such a young age, because I still have it. And then some, which is great. It's great that she felt like she benefited as a person from that, but it wasn't entirely positive, right? Because kids should be allowed to be kids. And Emily did hint the fact that dealing with that level of responsibility that she had and the expectations that were placed on her from people around her didn't come without a price. Emily, around the time that Hannah Montana wrapped, she looked back on those like 11-hour shooting days and stuff like that, and she remembered that they could be really overwhelming. And I'd imagine that especially when she had other things on her plate as well that she wanted to attend to, like school and her social life, it would have felt quite limiting. And on top of that, she recalled that there really actually wasn't that much room for the kids to just be kids on set. Not in her mind and her experience anyway, because everyone obviously perceives things differently, but Emily recalled that everyone was working on a time crunch, and so every single cast member, including the young ones, were expected to maintain a laser focus on the job at hand, which is quite unusual for a child to have to do for 11 hours straight when they've got other things to be doing as well. And also because as a kid, I mean, you are a little bit like your attention drifts a little bit more, but Emily said that if they happened to goof off on set, then they'd probably be yelled at, which nobody else actually mentioned. So I was surprised to hear her say that. And then also, as much as Emily did appreciate that these sort of things made the Disney Channel feel like a big extended family, she didn't really love the joint events that they were expected to participate in. Like, she mentioned the Disney Channel games, because most people I saw talking about them, Mitchel, Jason, couple people in other shows, they remember the Disney Channel games really fondly. Emily, no. She sarcastically, she said, unpaid 1 week in Disneyland where we just sweat our butts off. Yeah, that was real fun. And I guess, you know, Emily's life didn't revolve around Disney, so if she wasn't being paid for her time, then she probably would have preferred to have been at home or like studying, hanging out with friends, doing anything else. But even for Emily, and we've spoken about how, you know, she could go out in public, especially in disguise, without having to worry too much about being interrupted or anything like that. But it did get harder and harder for her to have the opportunity to do those things without a care in the world, because it got to the point that, you know, everyone, even little girls, were carrying little cameras around in their pockets in the form of these like smart cell phones. So as the years went on, Emily found it more and more difficult to switch off and to keep her professional life separate from her personal life, which is something that had always been so important to her. But as soon as 2007, in a New York Times article, it detailed that Emily said she was dismayed to discover hundreds of blogs that purport to be written in her name, and she is not thrilled when fans take her picture on the street when she's wearing her gym clothes. And also in that article, which I found interesting because everywhere I was seeing that Emily had stayed in school, she'd stayed in high school, so I assumed that meant she saw it all the way through. But actually it was revealed that she left in grade 9. So I think, I can't remember, was she 15 or 14 at that point? 15 years old in grade 9. I can't remember the US years, but she'd done that basically in favor of working with a private tutor on the set of Hannah Montana, so she was kind of doing homeschool at this point. And it was genuinely just because the show had gotten so popular and balancing school and work had become way too much to manage. It wasn't feasible because they were expected to be in so many more places now, doing so many more things. They had a million media commitments and photo shoots to attend to, and going to an in-person high school just didn't allow her to do all of those things because you didn't have the freedom, right? It was like, oh, I can't come in today, I'm at a photo shoot all day, and it's like, boo-hoo, cry me a river, you're coming to school, do you know what I mean? But luckily, as much as Emily did want to stay in regular high school, she did come to enjoy homeschooling because it gave her a lot of control and she liked that. So she really had a lot of say in the courses she took, for example, and what she chose to focus on. So instead of going from period to period, it's like she could just sit there for a day and do economics or whatever. And also, of course, it helped her take the steps that she wanted to in her career. Because in 2009, Emily entered a world that she called the polar opposite, essentially, of acting, which was the music industry. Basically, Emily's character on Hannah Montana could not sing to save her life. It was like a character trait of hers. But Emily actually had quite the passion for music, and it had spawned in her, really? That's the word I chose? I don't know. It had existed in her. It ignited when she was a little kid. So after a few years of working on Hannah Montana, just like Miley had, Emily wanted to break away from that show a little bit and establish her own identity as an individual in the public eye. And making music allowed her to do that. So about branching out into music, Emily said that I never talked to Miley about it. I never talked to anybody on Hannah Montana. I kept it to myself. I want this to be purely me. I want to make this road my own. I just realized I forgot to check who she signed with. She was with Wind Up Records, along with best-selling artists like Creed and Evanescence. So this was very much something that she was doing separately from Disney. That's important to note, I feel. I don't know why I didn't find that out before. But basically, whenever filming for Hannah Montana was on hiatus, like they were in between seasons or something like that, Emily would hit the road and go on tour. And it was great because she could just take her schoolwork with her wherever she went, no problem at that point. And that setup really worked for her because she wanted to do the whole traveling thing. She actually didn't like to be locked down in one place for too long, and that was one of the reasons that she felt drawn to the entertainment industry, because she loved to work in all these different environments and be doing different things all the time. And so in that way, Emily was beyond ready to move on to something different. When Hannah Montana ended, she'd been on the same show for 4 years, playing the same character that she'd grown out of for the most part, and she was over it. But still, she did say that she enjoyed filming the final season of the show. She said that the writers sort of kicked it up a few notches, and honestly, she thought it contained some of their best episodes ever. But regardless, it could not be over soon enough. She was more than ready to spread her wings and fly away. And still, of course, the last day on set was sad, because Emily had been working on Hannah Montana for 4 years straight, and she said, you know, anyone working any job for 4 years is going to feel a little bit gutted when they walk out for that last time, which, yeah, definitely. It's hard to leave at least certain people behind, certain things behind, and they shed some tears on set and everything, but Emily was ready to go. She ad-libbed her last lines on the show so that she could have the final words in the entire series, which I thought was quite funny to find out. What a legacy she left.
I love you so much.
And then she said goodbye to her co-workers. She nabbed the back of her dressing room chair that said Emily Osment on it, and then she left. Because as much as Emily loved Hannah Montana, the show did drain her. It drained her in so many ways, and Emily was happy to finally leave that behind, take her memories, and move on. So in the aftermath of the show, Emily did continue to sing and act, and in fact she said that she loved doing both of those things so much that neither of them really felt like work. But Emily also wanted to take some of her newfound freedom and sort of stitch together a slightly more normal life for herself. Mitchell once I heard him say that Emily was the smartest person on set of Hannah Montana because she was so studious. She enjoyed going to school and she did really put her effort into studying, and her drive to learn did not end when high school did. So, inspired partially by Emma Watson, Emily headed off to college. At first, Emily wasn't sure what she wanted to study. She was tossing up, maybe like I'll major in something like psychology or English. But in the end, Emily's heart is in performing and she knew that. And so she ended up studying theatre at the Occidental College, which is like a private liberal arts school. And Emily, she lived on campus and she generally had a very normal experience there from what she said. She said that she interacted with some people that liked her and some people that didn't. She earned herself the nickname Bluebird off of her singing voice, and she happily took all of the unique classes that the school had to offer. So Emily said that she had a great time during her 2 years in college, and I think it helped that she was doing something in the entertainment field because she didn't really have to put her career on pause. She actually felt quite supported in doing what she needed to do for her career. So college didn't hold her back at all from auditioning or taking on jobs. And actually, Emily had to leave college slightly early when she booked the role of Gabby Diamond on the sitcom Young and Hungry, which was produced, funnily enough, by Ashley Tisdale. So some Disney connections there. So that became Emily's next venture. She was the main character in that show. And from there, she continued acting. But I will say, she's really struck a great balance of being in the public eye. She's a working actress, but she's not living under the microscope that a lot of big names are. So she's got her job security and she's also got her peace of mind, and I'm sure she's quite grateful for that if what I'm perceiving is actually correct. But notably, as I mentioned, Emily's done Young and Hungry, then she moved to New York to take up a role in Young Sheldon, on which she actually played the wife of the actor Montana Jordan. And what a callback that is, right? What a crazy coinky-dink. But now her role on Young Sheldon has led her into a main character role in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, which is like a spin-off of the show. And as far as music goes, it's been a little bit more sparse, but Emily, she teased her fans with pops like, let's be friends so we can make out. She was very like punky, almost like Pink kind of vibes. Like when she was making music in 2009, 2010, and then she dipped from the scene for like a decade. She was leaving her fans foaming at the mouth, begging for more music, and she just was not giving them anything. And then in 2019, finally, Emily began releasing music again, but this time it was under the moniker Bluebird with 2 eyes. And that, of course, is a name she chose in reference to the nickname that she earned in college. And upon taking up this new venture in music, Emily shared that music is the one thing that she lives for, and she was motivated to release personal, intimate songs that really aligned with her under this new stage name. She said, I think Bluebird is the person that I've always aspired to be. That project brings out such good things in me. It brings out so much more honesty and realness than my Emily Osment music, or just my persona as an actress in general as well. And Bluebird is sort of this way that I can put a curtain over myself and say, okay, this is what I have to say. So clearly that venture is very freeing for her, is the way it feels, and I will say that her voice is quite pleasant to listen to. Most recently, Emily has put out songs like Real People and Porcelain Doll, and I think they're quite a cool insight into the woman that Emily has grown into. But still, Emily hasn't forgotten where everything sort of kicked off for her. On the odd occasion, she will still catch up with her co-stars from Hannah Montana. She was actually the person that everyone from like Jason to Moises to Mitchell, they all seemed to mention that they were still loosely in touch with Emily in particular. You know, they knew that they could text her and have a nice conversation, they could give her a call and have a chat. And every now and again, Emily will make a post or something referencing the show as well, referencing Hannah Montana. Like this year, she celebrated Hannah Montana's 20-year anniversary. She posted a photo of a script from an episode they shot on Thursday, the 26th of July, 2007. And she said that seeing that script brought to her attention 2 things. 1, that she's old, and 2, she said it brought to her attention that she's still doing what she loves all these years later. So that's really special. But what about Mitchell? What about Mitchell? Oh boy, what about Mitchell? Well, starting from the start, Mitchell said that being a kid in the entertainment industry, like before social media was huge, was actually quite the treat. He quite liked that because he said, you know, now you can log in, you can scroll through comments on your social media of people reinforcing this idea that, oh my gosh, you're so awesome, you're like the coolest person ever, and that's, yeah, it's not great to read. But before that was a possibility, Mitchel felt like he was living the dream because the whole industry was just fun for him. Like, he'd go to an event and he'd be excited to be a part of it, he'd be hyped to see someone famous there that he admired, and he'd be sidetracked by the thought of, you know, I hope we're going to In-N-Out after this and getting a burger every now and again that would cross his mind. So it was just good, you know, there was no instant feedback, there was no cacophony of opinions eating him up, he was just doing what he loved. It was fine. But moving on to Hannah Montana, Mitchel has tended to actually speak really highly of the show. He said that not only was it a phenomenon, which was obviously great for his career, but also it was a super easy set for him to work on. For one, because he found his character, Oliver Ogan, really easy to play, so it was like nothing for him to hop on stage and do a couple lines. And for two, he just enjoyed Hannah Montana. He liked that it was a family-friendly show, so it didn't force him to do things that he wasn't ready to do. He didn't have to discuss mature topics or anything. And also, in his eyes, everyone from the craft services to the executive producers were fantastic. Mitchel really felt like he was treated like gold, and the studio was a happy and fun place for him to be, even for those really long stretches of time on big days. So Mitchel hasn't actually voiced many complaints about his time on Hannah Montana, at least like vocally, you know, from what he is clearly saying. He's maintained that he loved his co-stars to pieces. He saw them as being like a secondary family, he said, and in fact, they almost felt closer to him than his family because those relationships that he formed on set were organic. They were strengthened by this unique shared experience that they could all bond over. And so Mitchel has said that he associates the cast of Hannah Montana with some of the greatest moments of his life. He reckoned that going to work on that show was like going to hang out with his friends all day. It was like his high school experience. It was just a fun time. It was just, it was his teenagehood. So Mitchel loved to be on set, and he loved being Oliver Ogan as well. Because he didn't really mind all of these little things. Like, he didn't care that he didn't have much control over certain aspects of the show. For example, his appearance. He actually got his ears pierced in real life quite early on in the show, and then he apparently had to grow out his hair to cover his piercings up until later. And he said, yeah, that happened, but like, he just wasn't phased. Especially about, you know, the wardrobe side of things. Mitchel was like, I never had much of a say in what I was going to wear or look like, but that was probably for the best because I wasn't great with that kind of stuff anyway. So that didn't bother him, but he did look back fondly on the fact that he had some control over a few things. Like, he looked back and said that they'd improv maybe half their lines. That's what he thought, but he enjoyed that. And overall, Mitchel said that it was a good working environment. He appreciated that the kids, including him, were shown a lot of privacy and a lot of respect on set. And this is his perspective. Like I said, they all interpreted this differently. But Mitchel, he'd even say that the fact that young people were around was always kept in mind, to the point that he never once heard anyone even so much as swear on a set anywhere on Disney. Like, Disney hired good people that cared, is what Mitchel said. He felt like he was kind of being treated as if he was on an equal playing field with the adults. And Mitchel said that that dynamic actually encouraged him to behave better because, of course, he didn't want to shatter those expectations that were being placed on him. Especially because, unlike Emily, Mitchel professed that entertainment was his lifestyle. It was not just a job, it was what he chose to do, and it was what he was going to do with his life. And so he stayed respectful and he worked hard because he wanted this. Mitchel did go through homeschool, is my understanding. I don't know whether he graduated, but I know he was doing schoolwork, but mainly he did focus his attention on learning the ins and outs of the show business. He later said, you know, I'm not great with science or maths, but I can tell you how the industry works. But similarly to the main girls of Hannah Montana, Mitchel wasn't all in on that show. He actually had his own ventures that he wanted to undertake, specifically in music. When Mitchel was a kid, he took a real interest in learning all about music, you know, how to play it, how to make it sound right. He was very much inspired by his older brother, who was now in Metro Station with Miley Cyrus's brother, Trace Cyrus. But in the end, acting was just easier for Mitchel to get into, and so music became more of an afterthought for him because he just wanted to work, and he was able to do that in the acting industry. And then actually he spoke about how Mason, Mitchel's brother, he found success as being part of Metro Station, and then Mitchel, as much as he could get into music, he kind of didn't want to because he didn't want to encroach on his brother's spotlight. So he just continued to hold off on the idea. He was like, I'll get to that at some point, but now's not the right time. But then one day Mitchel finally brought that up to Mason, and he wondered, you know, do I still have to keep waiting, or can I get on that train? And Mason emphatically was like, no, you don't have to keep waiting. Go ahead and make an album. I'll be a part of it. And so Mitchel, he went into this music venture, and unlike Emily, he did it hand in hand with Disney. He was fully supported by Disney in his musical pursuits. Like, as soon as he told the Hannah Montana Montana writers that he was making an album. They wrote it into the script that Oliver was actually a singer, and then Mitchell was finally allowed to reveal his PSD on camera. But yeah, he had like a band and singing scenes. His own songs were put in the show. And higher up than that, as soon as Mitchell approached Disney and said, I want to be a pop singer, it happened. Overnight, he just was a pop singer. So Disney, he wasn't signed to Hollywood Records, he was actually signed to Walt Disney Records. And from there, Disney booked Mitchell shows, they made him merch, and they just would like plonk him in front of 20,000 screaming kids with his face on their t-shirt and be like, there you go, you've done it. And he loved every second of it. Mitchell loved being famous. That boy loved attention. I think he had like a tiny bit of an ego, perhaps. I think he did keep it in check to some degree, but like he loved to be loved. Do you know what I mean? So in interviews around this time, and then even looking back like 10 years later, Mitchell was like, man, the life of a musician is the life for me. He immediately started contemplating how he could get out of the acting gig and just lean fully into being an artist because he loved it so much. I think that was because music was so freeing for Mitchell, because he spoke about this later. He said, like, rather than being told who he was and when he was supposed to show up and where and what he was going to say when he was there, like when he was filming on set for Hannah Montana, for example. In music, Mitchell was kind of his own boss. He could decide where to be at what time. He would be in charge of writing his own scripts or songs. And he wasn't playing a character. He was literally just being himself. So nothing could have been easier, quite truly. Especially because that kid was not singing when he was on stage, so he just had to sound good in studio. Because listen, I respect that Mitchell was putting on a good show. He was out there dancing his little booty off, but his mic was just a prop, and honestly, they barely even tried to hide it. But either way, didn't matter. Mitchell was loving his new pursuit. He said that music had become his life, and it was also his pathway to establishing his own kind of more mature identity in the world of show business, which was happening quite slowly because obviously he was still with Disney. He was still being marketed by Disney, which meant that he had to keep it child-friendly enough that they would continue to support him on his journey. But like I said, he was being completely supported by the show writers of Hannah Montana, and he also was being set up to perform everywhere, from like festivals to Disney parks to Disney cruises. Still, in interviews at the time, Mitchell made it clear that his life didn't entirely revolve around show business, it just mostly did. He was like, I've still got time. He insisted, I still have time to hang out with my friends. He said, I just love to drive around in my car like a normal 16-year-old, because he was 16 at the time. And part of what kept Mitchell as grounded, as he said he was his family. He said that his parents ensured that he had chores to do, and he was still responsible for keeping his room tidy, and you know, he had to pitch in with the family dog, all that kind of stuff. And so he said that he kind of did have just like a normal teenage life. And he also said that when it came to the conversation of working with his parents, Mitchell never was told like, you have to do this. He was always more asked, are you sure you want to do this? And he was, like, he really did want to do everything he was doing. Mitchell never ever failed to emphasize that he was born into and raised in the entertainment industry, and he loved that. He wanted nothing less and nothing more either. Like I said, he refuted the idea that show business was hard. He said, no, I have a great life and show business is not rough at all. He actually thought it was wonderful, is what he said. And I think that generally what helped was that most of the potential downsides of the industry, as much as they might have been affecting him, and we'll speak about that very soon, Mitchell didn't see them as down. He saw them as positives. He saw them as positive things. Like he loved to perform for people. He loved to hear people cheering for him, and he loved how hard Disney was working him because it was getting his name and his face out there so he could do more of it. Mitchell even appreciated his wild fangirls, and they were wild. They were quite wild.
Mitchell Musso! Mitchell Musso! Mitchell Musso! Oh, you're hurting! He's behind the man! Bring him over here! He touched my hand!
Why are you a Mitchell Musso fan? What do you like about him?
Everything.
Mitchell has told stories about fans that are just a bit nuts, and it didn't seem to strike any concern on anyone, even him. He was just like, funny story. So like, for example, a few fans he said had jumped up on stage while he was performing. There was one that stuck with me in particular that he said like he took his shirt off during a concert, which he said was quite normal for him to want to be shirtless because he was from Texas and he would just like to take his shirt off when he got hot. But anyway, he was up on the stage, took the shirt off, and he set it down by the drum kit. And like as soon as it touched the ground, some chick rushed up onto the stage, grabbed the shirt, and ran back off. But like basically before security could move a muscle, she was just gone like the wind. And then Mitchell told this even stranger story to me about this girl that he said dove across this 8-foot-long table to kiss him on the lips. So the event security were like frantically trying to confiscate everyone's phones and cameras in case someone had captured a clip of that happening. And that's just weird to me. Like that's like, just don't do that. But Mitchell somewhat did encourage that kind of behavior, because he definitely didn't condemn it, I'll say that much.
If you're just standing there, it doesn't catch my eye because there's no life, you know what I mean? I play off crowds, so I'm looking for like the most hyped up part, you know what I mean? Whoever's jumping the most, I'm coming straight to you because that's what, for me, you know, amped. It makes me want to run.
Mitchel said that basically he kind of liked the crazy fangirls because they made him feel like a rock star. They made his concerts feel more like rock concerts, and that's the vibe that he was going for, like a Disney-fied rock star. So it kind of worked. And plus, realistically, Mitchel knew that he wouldn't be where he was if not for those boy crazy fans that like obsessed over him and interacted with him inappropriately. Without that, I mean, from his perspective anyway, I'm sure he wouldn't be a star. And Mitchel just loved to be a star. Like, you might remember that Emily was not keen on the rise of like smartphones and social media and being reachable 24/7. Mitchel, on the contrary, obsessed with it. Loved it. He got a BlackBerry in 2009, and he said that he was just like totally addicted to it in no time. He was constantly updating his Twitter page because he knew that's what his fans wanted. It was all about his image and how popular he was. Something that I noticed about Mitchel over the years, even into like 2016, was that he really, really cared about what his fans wanted to see from him. By the time that Mitchel was in like his late teens, he was completely swept up in the Disney Channel scene. He had so much work falling into his lap. It was insane. I don't know what it was about Mitchel, but the executives at Disney loved him, or at least they seemed to, because it started off pretty slow. In 2008, Mitchel worked on Hannah Montana and also the Disney Channel original movie, Hatching Peach. But then by the time season 4 of Hannah Montana rolled around in 2010, Mitchel was working full-time on Pair of Kings. He was voicing Jeremy on Phineas and Ferb. He was the host of Prank Stars. He was making music. He was touring. And he was supposed to be filming Hannah Montana. So Mitchel actually only appeared in the first and last episode of season 4 because he was actually genuinely just too busy with other projects to invest any more time in it. Like, he could not be there. He'd have to like Skype call him with a green screen behind him to have any hope of being in an episode. Like, he was just so busy. So in general, I think it's fair to say that Mitchel was a huge fan of the fame and the fortune that Hannah Montana had spurred him into. But looking back, Mitchel did admit that growing up on such a big show was a bit tough in some aspects, which is unsurprising to hear. But he said that, you know, as much as he was fortunate to have no concerns about money or housing, anything like that, anything that your average person might be worried about, still, being on the show was a real give and take. Mitchel acknowledged that it made him who he was and it gave him everything he had, but it was a lot for a kid. So throughout all of this, he maintained a really, really positive attitude on the surface. You'd never be able to tell that he was going through anything other than pure joy being in the industry. But underneath, there were all these little things that were kind of chipping away in Mitchel. And, you know, I'm sure it was a lot of things. He hasn't actually spoken too much about the downsides of the industry, but I'd say that just like Billy Ray was concerned about with his own daughter, it's possible there were some sort of predatory people in Mitchel's circle, and I don't know, you've got this kid who's overworked and he's constantly under scrutiny, he's laden with expectations, and we've seen it happen before. Mitchel acted out. Especially, he spoke about, you know, he was this angsty teenager who self-admittedly, he said he hated everything and everyone. He hated the world. He was curious, I'd say, about substances and girls and parties. And so it was really hard for Mitchel to stay on the straight and narrow because he kind of like, he worked hard and he did work hard, but he also played hard. And so Mitchel started drinking when he was underage, just like I'm sure the rest of the Hannah Montana cast probably did as well, but he hid it pretty decently until a story came out. It was about Mitchel Musso getting in trouble, and it hit the headlines in 2011, so not long after Hannah Montana ended. Of course, he was still on Disney Channel doing a bajillion other things, but to preface the story, Mitchel has said that basically this happened in his neighborhood and he was pretty well known by the local police force because they'd attended his house countless times for noise complaints, so they weren't necessarily great fans of him. But this happened so late one Sunday night that it may as well have been morning. It was like 4 a.m. and Mitchel was driving around with alcohol in his system. He was 20 years old at this time, of course, with the legal drinking age in the US being 21, so there are two glaring issues with the fact that he was driving around under the influence. But there were also two different stories floating around as to how the situation unfolded, so I'll tell you both, although I'm inclined to believe one more than the other. So the one that Mitchel told probably 5 or 6 years down the line after this happened was that he was at this intersection and he witnessed a car crash, and so he pulled over and he walked up to check on the people involved, but the cops were at the scene already, even though he'd literally just witnessed this car crash. Whatever. He was out there walking and the cops called out to him. The police asked Mitchel, what he was doing out. They said he looked drunk, and they gave him a breathalyzer test, which he failed. And so they promptly arrested him, and Mitchell said that the police did all of that before they even attended to the people that were actually involved in the car accident, like before they got them out of the cars or anything. And then he said that he spent 14 hours in jail, and he felt like his life was imploding, which it kind of was. But the story that made it to the media, which is the one that I'm more inclined to believe, was that Mitchell didn't slow down when he was requested to by police who were controlling the traffic because of a car accident that Mitchell probably did not directly witness. And so that's how Mitchell ended up having an interaction with the police. He didn't cause an accident, that was unrelated, but he was driving under the influence, and he could have caused an accident, couldn't he have? But either way, TMZ shared that cops approached Muso's 2007 black Mercedes-Benz and detected a strong odor of alcohol. Law enforcement sources also tell us that Muso was given a breathalyzer test and he blew well above 0.08, which is the legal limit in California for people who are over the age of 21. Muso was booked on suspicion of DUI and hauled to a nearby station. Bail was set at $5,000. Muso was released from custody on his own recognizance a few hours later. And we also know from the media that Mitchell left the police station with a fine, 36 months of probation time, and mandatory alcohol education classes lined up. So like I said, I'm more inclined to believe what I read directly from the police, but whether Mitchell's story had much truth to it or not, he did acknowledge after telling it that in hindsight, what he did was wrong. Regardless, he said that nobody should ever drive under the influence. Ding, 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 correct Mitchell Muso. But regardless of any lessons that he might have learned from the whole situation, at the time, this whole debacle did kind of blow up Mitchell's career. He went from doing so many different things with Disney to Disney pulling the plug on everything that involved his face. So he was replaced on Pair of Kings by the ginger guy that was in Zeke and Luther. He was removed from Prank Stars. His musical career went down the drain. The only thing he was still doing was Phineas and Ferb stuff because his likeness wasn't shown in it. So suddenly Mitchell went from having an abundance of work to having nothing. Mitchell had no future and barely any present with the Disney Channel at that point. Everything that Mitchell had worked so hard to establish for himself from a very young age had been squashed. Mitchell did go on to continue working in voice acting roles for the Disney Channel for quite some time. He ended up being Wally in Milo Murphy's Law, which he was in alongside the likes of Sabrina Carpenter and Weird Al, and he also did like the Phineas and Ferb movies and stuff like that. But like I mentioned, anything that involved Mitchell's likeness was out of the question, so there were a lot of things that he suddenly could not do. In the coming years, Mitchell's life, it didn't look too great. I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but from my understanding, he did fall out with either some of the cast members or some of the crew from Hannah Montana. That was like a passing comment that he made. And I wondered if perhaps that had something to do with that shady comment that he made when Miley said that he smoked pot on the set of Hannah Montana, and he was like, that's not how I remember it. However, I've got plenty of stories about Hannah Montana history if we're getting into that. But then, I don't know, because as of like 2022, he said that to that day, he loved every single one of his castmates from Miley to Moises. Like, I don't know what happened there. But that aside, just sort of like gleaning from the details that we're privy to, it does sound like Mitchell went on to have a battle with addiction, which is really, really sad. Well, let me not put words in his mouth. He's definitely had a battle with something to do with mental health. I'm going to insert a clip of him talking about it so that we're on the same page before I start talking about anything else.
I took time off, one, I was really young, you know, and I'd been working since I was really young, and I know a lot of my peers have done the same thing. My story's nothing new compared to theirs. We've all sort of lived this, in this this entertainment industry way of living. And so they wanted to continue working. And it's not that I didn't want to continue working. I just had things that I needed to figure out. And also, I don't think I was very happy. Really? Yeah, I don't think I was like genuinely happy because I was always looking for something more. And that's not a bad trait to have. My mother loves that trait about me. I'm constantly on the go. It's hard to keep me in a spot for even this long, you know, if we're not working. And I just wanted to live and be comfortable going to bed by myself without friends, without the posse and work, and knowing that I had to do something in the morning. it was also really kind of a gift from God because I was able to go spend time with some of my family members who passed away pretty recently. And so all of those things made me realize that I was on the right track. So whatever I had done, however much time I took off or taken off, there was a justice in it for me to be who I'm supposed to be today.
But I theorize that for a couple of reasons. Namely, in 2022, Mitchel returned to the music scene and he released an album entitled Ghost. And the theme of Ghost was definitely not radiant joy. There are songs, for example, entitled Paranoid, Meaningless Sex, and Loser. And Loser in particular, I heard Mitchel refer to as a song that wasn't his best musically, but he said he recorded it in one take and the lyrics just flowed out and it really connected with him. And I'll read you some of those lyrics. They go, I don't really think this shit gonna take too long before I'm doomed. Think I drank enough, really hate waking up. And then I'm a loser now. These drugs will save me from myself. I can't get up when I'm so down. And it's tough almost to come to terms with the fact that someone who once had people twice his age saying things like this to him.
17, a guy like you makes me realize how much I wasted my life. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Easy now.
Mitchel Moises.
Could say those things about himself a decade later, but that's where we're at. And so as much as Mitchel has always spoken very highly of his childhood in the industry, I mean, something went awry, didn't it? And clearly it's not all sunshine and rainbows because Mitchel has been sort of candid in more recent interviews about how the show business isn't all it's cracked up to be, basically. You know, Mitchel, he was like, whether they'll admit it or not, nobody wants to be at the Oscars and watch somebody else win. He said, we're all rooting for ourselves. We've all got egos. Which is a generalization that I can't comment on, but if that's his experience, then I'm really glad that he's processing that. And in general, I think it's just good that he's accepting that not only good things have come out of the industry for him, but on the more positive side of things, Mitchel has had little reunions with some of the Hannah Montana cast members over the years, and he's spoken fondly about those. He also still talks about how much he loves to be an entertainer and how his family is awesome. Both of those things are great to hear, that he's still got his passion and a supportive close inner circle. And Mitchel has also offered some insight into sort of how his life has changed since those Hannah Montana days. And as of 2022, he said that he actually felt like he was a lot more of a relatable person. Mitchel has said, you know, he doesn't live a crazy life. He doesn't live in mansions or drive around super nice cars. He's just living out a pretty low-key life, starring in the odd independent movie, releasing his own music, and trying to get himself on track. As for what he's doing now, as of November 2025, Mitchel is starring in a show called The Rise. I think the first episode came out in November of 2025. But yeah, he's acting in that as the character Chase Wolfson, which is very like fan fiction-y, but he's actually doing that alongside Jake T. Austin, who was of course Max in Wizards of Waverly Place, so that I thought was quite a fun fact. But to wrap up speaking about Mitchel, I will say that in an interview in 2016, he said, I have always wanted to shine in a brighter light, even if I'm going through something or life gives me lemons. We have all been dealt bad cards. And I just really hope that Mitchel can continue to work towards being that bright light and being a happy and healthy person, because there are a few things that have happened in the past decade or so, including a couple run-ins with the law and also an unsavory podcast with Shane Dawson, which I will say, listen, it's Shane Dawson, and I think it's happened with a lot of people that they've spoken to Shane Dawson and they've kind of like stooped to his level a little bit, but that did not make it any less uncomfortable to listen to what Mitchel had to say on that podcast. I'll play you some, actually. I'll play you some.
What was the weirdest sexual experience? Like when you're that, how was that, when you're that age? Like, as a YouTuber, the only pussy I can throw my way is 12, so I can't touch it legally. Right now, for you, when you're probably like 17, so you could touch that. How was that? Were you ever like on a Disney tour and then like all these fucking young pussies thrown at you and you're like, I don't know what to do? And Miley's like, I don't want it, you take it. Yeah. Wow, what was it like? Did they call you your character name? Was it asking you questions? Like, absolutely. What is Miley like?
Say beef jerky, do all these pops and Lolliver and do the Oliver smoking oaken, and you know, I've had all that. I think the weirdest was like my friend's mothers trying to fuck me, and that would be the weirdest part, you know, especially the ones in Texas.
Take us out there. So you're at your advocate. It's radio, Disney, where all ears and pussy. And you're sitting there, and you're signing autographs, and everybody's coming up to you, you're jaded, you're over it, you're maybe a little stoned, you're like, get the fuck out of my way. And then like, maybe like a barely legal girl comes up to you, and she's like, her titties are white, it's hot outside, she's sweating, she has underboob sweat, stripping down, she's like, sign my thing, smoking oaken. And then she like slips your thing, well, like a paper that's like, let's fuck, and then what do? You say like, oh, let me show you this over here. And then like, are you fucking like in the back, like where there's kids, you're screaming, like tell me about it.
Damn, that's a good one. This has happened before. And if she doesn't slip me the note, I'll make sure to say, hey, get that girl backstage, grab that girl backstage. The best part was when I was on stage doing music. Because I'm so open about like, if I want to bang this girl, if I want to hook up with this girl, whatever it is, it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? So, you know, I'll be in the song and I'll be like, I'm trying to play the song going, hey, I'm screaming at you, get this one back. And yeah, I mean, it's just it's interesting hooking up with the fan because you don't know how they're gonna look at you afterwards because you're no longer this star. You're just freaking
Mitchel, who's got ball sweat and everything else, it's just the truth, you know, like you're actually just a person. But it definitely got me off. Whether I actually got off or just the thought of doing it to get off got me off.
Now, quick, okay. Does she like laugh? Is it like, this is your man, I'm sucking your dick? Is it like a weird?
You know, it wasn't always for me. It wasn't always just fucking. It was like making out and like just like her jumping on top of me and ripping me up and hit me in the face and stuff. Like I like that kind of shit, you know. But yeah, it's just it's different because with a fan you never hear the words, I'm not gonna fuck you. You know, like with any other girl that I like try to go out on a date with or I'm texting for a while, the first thing that they say, yeah, we're not gonna fuck. We always fuck.
Well, not yet.
Yeah,
Give me a lobster or a steak first.
It's inevitable. But with them it's not. With them it's like this is all I want to do.
My pussy's
so
all
it's
flat
really
right
cool.
now.
So you don't really have to say anything. And it's just throw you on the couch. She just straddles on top of you. She like rips her shirt off and you're just like, oh my god, I finally know what Kanye West feels like. I am God. Yeah. You know, and like that was more of getting off than actually whipping my dick out. And getting off.
And then what happens right after the cum?
Is it like an awkward? Does she go like, so can you sign something? Yeah, that's happened. You gotta, can you sign something? Can we take a picture?
Yeah, I just signed the inside of your uterus. My dick.
Yeah, what else do you want from me?
I get the DNA, bitch. Hello.
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing. Oh, your life. Those are pretty fun, raunchy stories.
So yeah, there have been a couple of things that have happened in the past decade or so that haven't been such a good look for Mitchel, but I don't know what he's up to as of 2026, and I just hope it's something good. Now, Jason Earls. Let's speak about Jason Earls. So Jason remembers Hannah Montana very, very fondly. I think he's probably the member of the cast that loves it the most, possibly. Just like from the very first day of shooting until the last, Jason was enamored with Hannah Montana. From the jump, he said that he recognized that the concept of the show that sort of perfectly balanced portraying this aspirational life in contrast with a completely relatable life was a great concept. It gave girls something to relate to and aspire to be or to dream about, and that pulled in viewers obviously, but Jason also liked that the show included encouraging messages for its young viewers and that it showed the characters constantly improving themselves episode by episode. He thought those were really good sort of plot points and missions that they had, and he also really appreciated that as much as Miley and Emily could draw in that like tween girl demographic, that main sort of Hannah Montana demographic, Jackson and Billy Ray did kind of balance that out, and they'd sort of placated the brothers and the parents that might be dragged into watching the show, and so Hannah Montana kind of became this family show, and Jason was really, really happy to be a part of something like that, something that the whole family could enjoy. But funnily enough, I could not speak about Jason without mentioning this because it's crack up. He did have to fully commit to lying about his age for a while in the media in order to be a part of the show. Oh, it's just a bit funny. This was an article from 2007. It had this to say about Jason. Oh, it goes, Jason, who is 19, despite the Internet Movie Database's claim that he was born in 1977, admires the way that Michael J. Fox has handled his career, and he'd like to use Hannah as a springboard to more grown-up projects. Oh yes, Jason, how very not born in 1997 of you to say. But, you know, in the meantime, before Jason did move on to those more grown-up projects that he was looking forward to at the age of 19, Jason fully immersed himself into the character of Jackson, and he had so much fun. He loved being Jackson Stewart. He said that he really got to lean into that like silly, immature 16-year-old humor that his character had, and that was fun for him because his number one goal in every one of his scenes was just to be as funny as possible. That's all he had to do to play his part on the show properly, and Jason was made for that kind of work, basically. So like the fact that he could make a living doing that was mind-blowing to him because he was the class clown anyway. So now to finally nail down that main ongoing role and have it be like a very heavily physical comedy centered role. Oh, perfection. And Jason felt grateful that he got to work alongside the rest of the cast on Hannah Montana. He said that on set they had great chemistry together and they learnt how to play off of each other and work to everyone's respective strengths in no time, so that was a great outcome. And then off set there was never a dull moment. Like everyone was so different and yet so similar that every day was fun but unpredictable. So it was fresh, it was interesting. There was always someone, you know, butting heads with someone else. There was someone to bounce ideas off. There was something that everyone was laughing about, like a meme or something that was going around the set. And on top of that, what Jason really, really loved was that the cast all showed so much care for each other. So for example, Jason said that he had an hour 45-minute long commute in hideous traffic to get to the studio every day, and so Billy Ray and Miley Cyrus, they'd offer him like, you can just stay in our spare room and ride with us to work in the morning. It'll save you the hassle of going back and forth. And he thought that was a really lovely offer. And Jason, he also spoke really fondly about this moment that he shared with Miley backstage at one of her concerts. And he said that she like ran up to him, gave him a big hug. He wished for her to have a good show. And then she went straight out to perform. Like seconds later, he heard 70,000 people screaming her name, and it was just totally surreal, especially because he'd seen her go from her very first little performance as a tiny little girl to now being that little bit older and having that little bit more experience and performing to this insane crowd, he could barely believe it. He could barely believe like his luck to be a part of that. Do you know what I mean? And Jason, he actually became fast friends with the whole Cyrus family. So from like Miley's grandma, her Grammy, to her little sister Noah, they were all mates. And Noah actually spent a lot of time on the set of Hannah Montana because she was the little baby of the family. She'd hang around with her mom and stuff like that. But Jason, he'd recall with a smile the way that Noah would like light up when she saw him arrive to the studio in the morning, and she'd run up and give him a hug, and it sounded like that meant a lot to him. And that's sweet. It's quite sweet. And interestingly, listen, I don't know how this came about, but in 2009, Jason Earls had a daughter with, his wife at the time, and they named her Noah, which just piqued my interest because that's a really unique name for a girl, and so I almost have to imagine that he was sort of inspired by the Cyruses somehow to pick that name. But I don't know, that's genuinely just me speculating. It's just an interesting thought. But Hannah Montana changed Jason's life in more ways than just potentially influencing his daughter's name, because of course Jason credits it as being a huge turning point in his life and in his career. I mean, in some ways Jason's life was altered as soon as that first episode of the show premiered, because suddenly he couldn't go to the mall or a kid-oriented place like Chuck E. Cheese without getting recognized. And as the show went on, that got better and better because he was being less recognized as, you're Miley Stewart's brother on the show Hannah Montana, and more like, you're Jason Earls. But from the way that Jason put it, being on a Disney show wasn't necessarily everything you'd expect. Obviously it was his dream, and he was so excited to have finally landed an ongoing role in the industry, but, and this is like a really succinct version of what I gathered from the conversation he was having with these podcast stars, one of which had also been on Disney. But the big bucks from being with Disney more so came from going on like tours and selling albums and stuff like that, rather than just acting in any given DCOM or any, like Disney sitcom that was airing. And so what Jason said was that being like one of the smaller stars on Disney but still being really popular, it was kind of confounding because you have all of this attention and the notoriety that comes along with being a star on Disney, but you don't have the money coming in that's necessary to sort of insulate yourself from the harder parts of that. Because we do rag on, actors and stuff like that for making so much money, and I get that. But I also understand where Jason's coming from, where if you're going to be in a position where you're idolized and even possibly obsessed over, if you can't afford security, a house in a really good, like, gated community neighborhood, stuff like that, you are more at risk. And I think that's kind of what he was getting at. It's just me spitballing. But regardless, Jason said that his experience working for Disney was mostly positive, even with, the fact that they're a bit stingy being considered. Like, he said that there were perks to being on Disney. He'd get to attend certain events and have certain experiences that he really, really looked back on with love. They'd also practically hand him extra projects, like he got his role in the movie Dadnapped through a phone call being like, do you want the job? And Disney were willing to invest in their actors to learn new skills and stuff like that. So overall, what I gathered was that Jason said that Disney did treat their talent well. They just didn't pay that well. But Jason also said that, of course, it's relative. It's better than what he made working anywhere else. Like when he was a substitute teacher, he would have dreamed of the money that he was making on Hannah Montana. So it's all relative. And Jason was an adult when he got his role on Hannah Montana. He'd already kind of been through his experimental phase. He knew what he wanted in life. And so I think when Hannah Montana wrapped up, he was particularly sad about having to say goodbye to the show and these cast members that did change his life. They did change his life. He actually saw it as much as he was growing when he got his role on Hannah Montana, he said that he did feel like he grew up on that show alongside the other people that worked with him, in the sense that it was his big break. He was experiencing these things for the first time as well. But, especially being an adult, Jason had unequivocally chosen his path as an actor, specifically on the Disney Channel. He really enjoyed, and so he valued the stable ongoing work that he had on Hannah Montana, and he acknowledged that actors could run into some serious dry spells, so he was quite nervous about what his future had in store for him because he wanted really badly to continue working, and he just wasn't sure when he was going to land his next job, or even if he'd land his next job, which is quite the nerve-wracking thought. But Jason had to let go. The show was coming to an end, and so he took a few mementos from the set, including his Rico's Surf Shop. Is it Rico's Surf Shop or Rico's Surf Shack? Sure. There's too many S's, I'm confused. And he also took a shadow box worth of memories. He later put them into a shadow box, and he moved on to his next venture, which Jason got really lucky that his next venture came very soon. Pretty much right after Hannah Montana finished, Jason shot a pilot for a Disney XD show that he really hoped would be picked up by the network, and it was. And that show would go on to be known as Kickin' It. And Jason was so thankful, so thankful to have another job, especially, he said, on another sitcom, because that style of acting just suited him so much. And he also got to work with Moises' brother, Jason's other godson, Mateo, on that show, so super ideal for him. That was great. But Jason didn't stop there. He actually started to expand his skill set, so he went on from observing screenwriters and directors and lighting directors and producers and stuff like that on set to actually dabbling in all of those things himself. I guess he was putting to use some of that knowledge that he gained in theatre school and also the stuff that he picked up on set and things like that. So Jason, he actually got to do a little bit of directing work for Kickin' It, and then he went on to direct other stuff for both Disney and Netflix as well. He's also been in the writer's room, he's pitched stuff, he's produced stuff, and in turn, by doing all of these things, you might think that he's got less time for acting, but actually it's made him even better at the craft, because Jason has said that he can relate to the needs of pretty much all of his colleagues now, no matter what their position is, so he can make their life a little easier because he knows what they need, he knows what they're looking for. And Jason must have a good working relationship with Disney because he's actually continued to work with them even in recent years. Not only has he starred in High School Musical, the series, but he also took up a job as kind of like an acting coach or a mentor, he said he was, to the kids on that show. So his role was kind of to help these kids adapt to their newfound fame in their regular lives, and he was supposed to help them with the way they approach their characters, and he was supposed to like instill good acting habits in them. So Jason, he was almost kind of filling that like big brother role again on High School Musical, the series, sort of like he did on Hannah Montana, but now he had more first-hand experience. And he said it was so mind-blowing as well because he actually got to closely watch Olivia Rodrigo skyrocket into popularity in the same way that Miley Cyrus had done so many years before. And he really treasured that, I think. Like, he really loves to see the success of the people around him, especially the young people who are very hard workers. So that was something that he looked back on and said, wow, I'm so glad that I've been in the position to do that twice. But as much as things have been pretty rosy for Jason, from everything that I could see, it hasn't all been entirely smooth sailing. One qualm that Jason did bring up about the acting industry was that social media has changed things a lot, especially in the sense that follow accounts have way too much emphasis placed on them nowadays when it comes to auditions and stuff like that, and that's really not something that Jason is on board with. He just doesn't think that being willing to broadcast your private life online should be a precursor to getting acting work. He doesn't think it's fair to say that whether actors have 1 million followers or not is a good demonstration of how talented they are or whether they can draw on an audience or not. And he said that it's frustrating because, you know, he's not really a big social media guy, so he doesn't have a big following because he doesn't really use the platforms, and he's actually sort of lost out on jobs because of that. But what's cool is that instead of submitting to that and just accepting defeat or anything like that, Jason has decided to kind of go do his own thing. Jason is launching his very own official, unofficial podcast is what he's calling it. And on the show, it says that, quote, 3 idiots share our favorite memories of Hannah Montana with the fans so they can see the other side of the best Disney show ever. So the idea is that Jason will chat with Douglas Lieblein, who was a co-executive producer and also a writer on the show, and Shannon Flynn, who was the acting coach and a reoccurring director on the show, and they'll rehash things that happened and they'll talk about stuff from how the episodes came to be to what it was like on set, and there'll just be lots of fun stories. I'll definitely be tuning in. I think it'll be really neat. Update, I have tuned in. I have now tuned in to the Best of Both Our Worlds podcast, or BBOW, we're calling it BBOW for short, and it did not disappoint. Actually, I was thoroughly impressed with how fun it was to listen to. It was informative, it was goofy. I think that Douglas and Shannon and Jason have a really, really great dynamic, and I would implore you, if you are interested in this topic, if you enjoyed Hannah Montana when you were younger, please go watch it. Please. Hopefully the more support they have, the more episodes they make, because it's chef's kiss. No notes. Okay. Anyway, back to it. Thank you. And now, quickly, I want to run through some of the experiences that the aforementioned in the previous episode supporting cast members had on the show. And first, I want to start with Moises, who of course played Rico on the show, who actually did become a main character as time went on. And Moises, what he said about the show is that he enjoyed that he was able to be on a big show like Hannah Montana, that he could communicate to other kids his age on. It was very appropriate for the place he was in his life. And behind the scenes, Moises was very very much included in the main friend group. So if the rest of the kids and, you know, maybe Jason and Billy Ray were going out to watch a movie or grab some food or go bowling or what have you, then Moises would come along as well. And Jason, of course, we know really got along with Moises to the point that he almost felt like Moises was like a son to him. So he spoke really highly of Moises. He said that he was a funny little man, and generally Moises by everyone seemed to be pretty well liked. The worst thing that I ever heard anyone say about Moises was this:
I am a blabbermouth, so I think nobody has telling me any secrets.
And he said it about himself, so I think he was fine. And just from the looks of things, I mean, a lot of this is orchestrated because it was released by Disney, but there's no shortage of clips of Moises hanging out with the rest of the cast backstage, and they all look like they're having a great time goofing around together. And Moises has expressed himself that he felt like he was a part of that Hannah Montana and extended Disney family. So Moises said that he actually found the final days of filming Hannah Montana to be pretty emotional. Moises struggled to come to grips with the idea that the show was going to be over, you know, that he would never get to see the sets again and hang out with the cast all together again, but he figured that the show's legacy would live on, and of course he was correct, it has. But Moises's final words to the Hannah Montana audience was that to be on the show was a fantastic experience. He said that growing up, not height-wise but life-wise, on the show with his found family was really special, and he concluded that he had the best childhood that a kid could ask for. And Moises later told people that Hannah Montana was a formative time not only in the audience, like in the fans' lives, but in mine. It's a feeling of growing up together. When Moises first got off Hannah Montana, I mean, he was kind of unsure about what was next. Moises was only 16, and not only did he find it really difficult to transition into more mature roles at that age, but he was kind of too old to get into anything like Hannah Montana again, and then he was also tossing up what he wanted to do as far as his education went. So overall, it was a very unstable time in Moises' life, and being an actor is already such an insecure job, so having to shake free of Rico and establish himself as Moises on top of that in the industry was really difficult for him. It was a big undertaking, but Moises did it. He's found work as an actor since. I forgot to mention somehow that there was one controversy that Moises found himself in 2014, and it was after he posted these photos to his blog of him sitting shirtless in a bed that Willow Smith was also lying on. And the thing was that Moises was 20 at the time and Willow was 13. Now, there were other photos from what I understand of, for example, Moises and even Jaden Smith, who was 15 at the time, lounging in the bed as well. So it wasn't like this was exclusively something that he did with Willow Smith. I think they also might have featured Kendall and Kylie Jenner, some of the photos that he shared. Willow's mum Jada did speak out about this and she was not fazed by it. This is what she had to say.
Jada, can you comment on the picture that was posted on Instagram of Willow and Moises?
Here's the deal. There was nothing sexual about that picture or that situation. You guys are projecting your trash onto it, and you're acting like covert pedophiles, and that's not cool.
So I'll leave you to make up your own mind about this whole situation, but I thought I'd mention it as something that was notable in Moises' life following Hannah Montana. Then most recently, he actually landed a job on the Fallout series adaptation starring as Norm, which I watched the first few episodes of that before my husband decided he didn't like it very much, and I did not recognize Moises at all. And Moises has mentioned as well that every now and again he does get the chance to meet up with some of the cast from the show. In particular, he spoke about this time that he ran into Emily at some event after not seeing her for like 5 or 6 years, and he said that was really cool. But he kind of compared it to, you know, like seeing a high school friend after you've left for college. So, I mean, he'll always have a strong bond with his former castmates. They'll always have a place in his heart, but they have grown up now. They're in different places in life doing different things. And I also, in the last episode, we haven't really spoken about him because he just hasn't come up much, but I also mentioned Cody Lindley as being one of the original supporting actors of Hannah Montana. In case you need a refresher, Cody Lindley played Jake Ryan, who was one of Miley's love interests on the show, and this is what we know about Cody's time on Hannah Montana. For one, Miley spoke to a teen magazine and she said that kissing Cody in character was like the best 10 seconds of my life. She said, I was like, oh my gosh, he's like an angel. And then she went, at that point they weren't filming anymore, but I made Cody think they were so I could kiss him one more time. But I don't think that was a real story. I think that actually that was a very formulated story to appeal to the demographic that she was speaking to that would be reading a teen magazine. Because in actuality, Miley wrote in her book Miles to Go that kissing in character was emotionless and routine, pretty much. And Cody said this as well.
So you have to be honest, is it tough when you have to do a little flirty, kissy scene with Miley?
I don't know. It is.
It is.
I mean, it's weird. I don't know. It's like we're friends. It's just part of the thing. It's not hard, but it's not like, a lot of people are like, oh, you're so lucky. I'm like, well, you know, it's just like, you know, it's just my job. I'm not like, I don't know.
Although, fun fact, Hannah Montana did start at the perfect time for the girlies who loved a bit of romance on screen. Because when it started in 2006, there wasn't this rule, but over time it was established that on the Disney Channel, kisses should not be a focal point of any moment in any show. So if characters ever did lock lips, then there'd be something like another character walking past or something getting like pushed in front of the camera that would block the majority of the kiss, and you'd just like see the end of it as they broke apart. And so Jake and Miley girls got very lucky that they had like fully fledged, I mean very like well behaved and sanitized, but fully fledged smooching scenes. Whereas, you know, the likes of Emily and Oliver, who did end up in a relationship, they had half of that at best when they ended up together. They were not seen kissing very much. But then Cody added, he said, quote, every time Miley and I would have a kissing scene, the prop guy would always have a fart machine somewhere and make the sound. And Miley would, you know, go, Larry. So not only were Jake and Miley's kisses a real event in the show, the prop guy Larry also made them a real event on set, which is just lovely, isn't it? Who said romance is dead? But yeah, regardless of any sort of awkward moments that they might have had to share, Cody and Miley did like spending time together. He said they'd even like hang out off set at her house. They'd go swimming and stuff like that. And Cody referred to Miley as being a really down-to-earth sort of normal girl, just with an overabundance of attention on her. So he spoke about how he didn't really get the excitement that people approached him with when they found out that he knew and worked with Miley Cyrus, because to him, yeah, she was just like a co-worker, a friend. But even going on interviews, the interviewer would always be like, so you work with Miley Cyrus, you get to be her love interest and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, I do. Looking back in 2016, Cody recalled that Miley was super sweet. He said that she taught him how to have fun on set and just laugh. And he also remembered being involved in the same sort of behind the scenes shenanigans that Emily spoke about fondly, like playing Guitar Hero and listening to music and just like having ping pong battles and stuff like that on set. And he also said that because he hung out with Miley behind the scenes, he got to know Billy Ray pretty well. And Cody actually had some really memorable times with the cast, even though he wasn't on the show that much. Like he spoke to Teen Vogue about one time that Billy Ray let Cody borrow his Range Rover to take Emily and Miley to Macca's on their lunch break. Well, he said McDonald's. Sorry, I said Macca's. But he said that they really did not have the smoothest ride. Cody was like, I was 17, so I went up on the curb a little bit. I wasn't used to such a big car, but we didn't tell Billy Ray until now. And then he also said, I don't know why, but Miley was barefoot, so he carried her inside. So Miley Cyrus was getting the Ariana Grande princess treatment from her cast members. That's lovely. And Cody, he spoke about other things as well, like spending time skateboarding with Mitchel around the set. He also said that, because Cody actually went on Dancing with the Stars, and he said that in between takes, he'd like practice dancing with Miley. And generally what Cody said was that whenever his character was due to make an appearance on the show, Cody returned to the same environment that he'd left last time, which was very fun and very welcoming. And very much like Emily, Cody loved filming for the show. He said that it almost felt like a theatre production to him. He recalled to E! News that the live audience was always a blast because you just get that jolt of energy, and the whole cast and crew was like a family, and you're just really tight-knit. Each week you're joking, you're having fun, and then you go out there and you lean on each other like a true team. So Cody said that the audience was electric, and he said that the atmosphere was almost like a live sporting event, and it left him feeling very accomplished every time he came off. And even though he only played a supporting character on the show, technically, Cody did attract quite the fan base. I mean, of course, he was like the cute love interest of the show, and so there was a point that he couldn't even go to the mall without being swarmed by screaming teenagers that wanted to get a picture with the man in Hannah Montana's life. And with talents like this, listen.
No, actually, you know what? Because I'm gonna be eaten up. Oh, good.
Oh, almost.
You can't be good at everything.
So close.
Look at you.
I get the hype. No, but about the fangirls, Cody said that he liked the attention fine, but it could get a little overwhelming, and especially when the girls started crying, he had no idea what to do. But he's probably had plenty of practice with that by now, because to this day, Cody says that he still gets recognized as being Jake Ryan out in public. But unfortunately, in like mid-season 4, Cody's character was unceremoniously booted out of Hannah Montana's life. This is probably the only other episode that I can pull on from memory, and it's when they were dressed up as like Santa and an elf, and Hannah started beating Jake Ryan for cheating on her at Dirty Filthy Ear Nibbler. So that was the end of Jake Ryan, and whether the audience or the cast liked it or not, they did not have the power to stop that. But Cody reminisced. He said, I think it was just such a match made in heaven. I even thought that we were going to be together, and it was just so sweet, because Miley was, I think, kind of bummed that they wrote my character out of the show, but you know, it's a show. There was only 2 ways they could go with it, so I was happy for the time that I had. But I do think it's funny because Cody is quite the Miley shipper. In another interview, he joked that everybody makes mistakes, everybody has those days, and he continued to say that I think if Jake could say anything, he'd say sorry. Guys make mistakes. I certainly made mistakes. But regardless of the longevity of his character's relationship with Hannah Montana, Cody did make it clear that he really enjoyed his time on set. He has maintained that he is incredibly grateful for the opportunity that he had to be on the show, even if it did end with his character being a dirty, dirty cheat. In 2009, for example, Cody said to Teen Vogue that Hannah has become a phenomenon and being along for the ride has been fun. I've always wanted to be a working actor. It's my passion and I love my job. I am thankful to God and my family for the ability to do that. But luckily for him, Cody did have plenty of things in store that didn't include playing Hannah Montana's on-again, off-again boyfriend as well. Actually, pretty much directly after his bittersweet ending on the show, Cody went on to Broadway. He did a musical called Over Here, and since then he starred in a few movies, notably Sharknado 4 and 5. And as of November 2025, Cody has said that he was developing a few original movies, and he was also doing some very rewarding work as a teacher at his family's acting studio. But to this day, Cody said that he finds it humbling whenever he remembers that he's cemented in people's memories because he happened to be on this kids show that made it big and stood the test of time. And it just blows his mind, right, that he was able to have so much of an impact on people during their formative years, during his formative years. And now for those people to maybe pass the show on to the next generation, for those kids to grow up and now show it to their kids, it's just a bit surreal, especially because he feels like a completely normal guy. So to have that experience as part of his history and even still be recognized for that work that he did years ago feels mind-blowing. Do you know what I mean? And Cody has said that he's taken the lessons that he learned from being on that show and he uses them to this day. So for example, he always keeps in mind the power that stories have to change people's lives because he's seen it, he's witnessed it firsthand with Hannah Montana. In the end, Cody said that he was happy to now be able to share what he learned along his journey with aspiring actors as he also continued to grow himself. And he concluded by saying that he'd like to leave a legacy of being a loyal friend and also someone that helped other people to create an impact. And that is everything that I know about the untold sort of cast stories of Hannah Montana. But I will say, lastly, that from what I gathered, the sort of like general consensus amongst the cast and the crew, like writer and co-creator Michael Moises, was that the show wrapped up everyone's storylines in a really satisfying way. So for the most part, everyone was happy with how the show ended. And it did almost end very differently, and Michael Moises was thankful that Miley supported whichever way the writers wanted to go, but Disney kind of wanted it to end where Miley, it flashback to her being this tiny little kid, like 5 or 6 years old, with Billy Ray and Tish putting her to bed, and it turned out that Hannah Montana was all a dream, and that would have been such a cop-out. So Michael was like, no, not that, and Miley was like, we can do whatever you think. And in the end, it ended up being the ending where Miley followed Emily to college, which is fabulous. But the cast is split on whether they'd be keen to do a reboot of the show. They tend to say, you know, we're all too busy with other projects, or maybe one day under the right circumstances, and those are both valid answers. But in 2020, Miley told People that I try to put on the wig all the time. She's just in storage collecting dust and I'm ready to whip her out. And Miley continued to say that the opportunity will present itself, and this year it did. Hannah Montana's legacy is being expanded on this year with a Hanniversary celebration that premieres on the 24th of March. So it's either already out or it's just about to come out. Both Billy Ray and Miley have been a part of it. From what I've seen, Miley revisited the set, and I think it's probably safe to say that we'll see some unseen behind the scenes clips and we'll be enlightened about some never before heard stories. So that'll be cool, I'm sure. But yeah, that's me done talking about Hannah Montana, which is fantastic because I've been talking about it for probably 4 hours now, just for this part, and it's lunchtime, team, it's lunchtime. Sorry if I like migrated across the screen, but I got uncomfortable sitting. See, I'm kind of wearing down my seat. I just plonk down in it all day, every day. It's not good. It's not good. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little series. I hope that you learned something new about Hannah Montana and what it might have been like working for Disney, being on the set of a Disney show back then. And I hope that it kept you entertained, occupied, locked in while you were working on something else. Or I hope that it just helped you like zone out of life for a little bit and have a good time. But yeah, I'm gonna go edit this video and also eat lunch. But first, of course, I have to say thank you so very much for being here and spending some time with me today. It just means the absolute world. It really truly does, and I don't know how to express that, but I hope just saying it is enough. And yeah, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope that life is treating you well, and if it's not, then hang in there because it will change. It always changes. And yeah, I'll leave you to it. Okay, bye.